are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive. It is Friday, September 17th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher. And we've got the whole Megillah today. 15 games, 30 teams, an hour to do it. We're going to have a ton to talk about. We're also going to talk about Jock Market at some point in time. They are the presenting sponsor of this show. I got to start here, though. Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Just catching Sean V's recap of last night's game where he was exactly right on De'Ami Brown, who got him a bunch of deep targets, just didn't catch them. So I guess things are normal.
I just assumed that he read my tweet and all of my explanations and saw my exposures for said Brown, because that went well for me as well. Seemed pretty clear. Just if you were anybody playing DFS, that was a place you were going to look. But, it was probably Sean V only on it and no one else. So you never know how that's going to work.
I read it as him saying that was a bad thing at 1,400. Maybe he was saying it was good.
Oh, wait. Oh, right. So we're saying that he was right, that Brown was bad?
I'm not sure. He just said 6, LOL. I don't know if he meant good, if he thinks 6 is good or bad. 6 was good yesterday.
Yeah, I was happy to have him. I played him a ton. We had him in cash, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Which worked out.
A lot of the people that I think are possibly better than me at cash actually had him at captain. Interesting. Is Sean V one of the people that you think is better than you at anything? I mean, he's anonymous. Maybe he's McLovin or something.
So he would be good at fake IDs?
Yeah, and well, that was a bad example since I know him, but you get the point.
Oh, so I heard it as McLovin, like
no, I meant the
28-year-old Hawaiian organ donor.
Yeah, no, I meant the DFS player.
Gotcha. Oh man. Anyway, we have to dive into this. We have to talk about every single team on this slate. At least we're going to say their name at some point in time. I'm diving in. Are you ready?
Yep.
Yankees and Indians, 5.1 run implied total for the Yanks, 3.8 for Cleveland. Ooh, hold on. I got to stop right now. Mike Campbell, does anyone real care about cash? I probably care about it more than GPPs at this point.
The only reason cash is so difficult to play is the only people playing it are the best players.
Yeah, and that's for you. If you still have the ability to play sub $5 contests, you should be playing cash. It's a testament to how good you think you are at DFS.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have time to get into the super in depth. I agree with you. There are exceptions, but yeah.
Sure, but like it is not a hand wave the way that we thought it was a couple years ago. We shouldn't, like, for a while we hand waved it. Like,
yeah,
we're not playing cash.
Yeah, I think people are worse at it than I gave them credit for. But especially to what you were saying, like the sub $5, I'm sure people that are good can still make money. But I still think that, like, assuming you have a limited amount of money to put into play every day, you're probably better off playing tournaments than cash.
It's got to be close. It depends on what you're getting into too.
It depends what your goals
obviously
are.
Like if you're playing $10 a day and grinding out, two head-to-heads and a couple quarter entries, it's a very different discussion. If you're able to play a couple $100 on a slate at the very minimum, play some cash. I promise. Yankees in Cleveland, Corey Kluber and Zach Plesac. Kluber's at 6% ownership at $9K. Plesac is at 1% ownership at $8,400. I'm not trying to get Zach Plesac here against the Yankees. Kluber seems fine. It's not something that I'm super excited about. He's not one of my top guys. Where are you looking at from a pitching perspective?
Yeah, I don't really have any sort of point to make on Plesac here. It's a tough matchup. He's not really favorably priced. Kluber is the more interesting of the two. He's $9K on DraftKings, which is okay. He's $7,700 on FanDuel, which I think is a pretty good price tag. The strikeout stuff for Kluber has been fine this year, 26.1%. But outside of that, he really just hasn't been nearly as good as we expect him to be. He's dealt with injuries. He has a 4.3 xFIP, 10.9% walk percentage is high. The Indians are not a great lineup. They certainly have guys in the middle that can do damage if Kluber's not on. The other small concern I have on Kluber, I don't expect him to be limited in the sense that it significantly affects his average performance. I do expect him to be limited in the sense that even if he's pitching really well, I don't anticipate him being allowed to go, like 105, 110 pitches, which at 9K, especially on DraftKings, that does matter on this slate because you have a bunch of really good pitchers at the top. So I think his ceiling is cut a little bit short compared to those other pitchers, just because I would not expect the Yankees to let him go quite as deep as some of these other pitchers will be allowed to go if they're pitching really well. So kind of just feel neutral on Kluber. Right now we have him at 7% ownership. That's come down a bit since this morning. Seems right to me. I had said this morning I thought he was a little bit more popular than he should be.
I'm with you on that one. It's as much ado about nothing. Where we have him is about right. I don't like the 9K price tag. I gave him just shy of 5 innings. It's a great strikeout matchup. I just don't think he's going to be out there long enough for it to matter. So I think that's about it for Kluber and Plesac. How are you feeling about Yankees bats? They are my number 3 stack overall right now. And I think no problem with ownership. And ownership, it's going to be really hard to have a problem with ownership today.
Yeah, I mean, ownership's pretty flat. It's a 15-game slate. When you talk about, and it's something I think that sometimes we don't emphasize enough, or I don't emphasize enough, but like looking at, ownership for a team versus their top stack percentage is only one aspect of this. Like the raw ownership matters as well. And that's why we say ownership matters more on 4-game slates than 15-game slates, because I don't care if a team's a little bit over-owned if they're all still 6% owned. I'm not competing with a large percentage of the field, and that's typically what you're going to get on these 15 gamers. So I like the Yankees here. Plesac, just kind of a run of the mill pitcher. Nothing particularly good about him. 214 expected ISO allowed, 2 right-handed hitters this year, 174 to lefties. And then the other thing with the Yankees is they are really cheap. Aaron Judge is the only hitter in the lineup above $5,000. Stanton's down to 4,600. Gallo's down to 4,200. It's going to be an easy lineup to get to. Right now, we have him going a little bit over-owned, but it's nothing crazy. I like the Yankees here.
Yeah, Rizzo in particular, the guy that I think is most under-owned for the slate. I think it all looks really good. Number 3 overall, number 8 in leverage. Do you have any interest going to Cleveland? There is the power trio of Ramirez, Reyes, and Bradley in the middle of this order. There is something there. There's no ownership at all coming in. Is there any value to Cleveland?
It's tough on a slate of this size. I'm never going to say not to go to Jose Ramirez. You have Bradley Zimmer hitting second again at 2,400, certainly a reasonable value option. But there's a lot of underpriced hitting on this slate. There is some cheap pitching you can use if you need value. There's plenty of pitching to pay up for as well. But it's just not a priority for me here. Anything
else, Yanks in Cleveland?
Nope.
All right. And we will sum everything up once we get to the end. You expecting the Yankees to be one of your primary teams?
Yes.
Okay.
Primary in the sense that relative to the other teams. I don't expect this to be a slate where I'm just jamming in 40% Yankees or something.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to do on a slate like this.
Right.
Nats and Rockies, basically a coin flip game. Josiah Gray going for the Nats, Airman Marquez for the Rockies. Neither guy getting owned at all. Do you think they should be?
Yes and no. I think that when you look at this in the sense of I understand why the ownership projections are what they are. It's really difficult if you're just talking from a projection standpoint and who would you most want in your lineup, it's really hard to make a case for either of these guys compared to some of the alternatives. But at the same time, they certainly offer enough upside here where if you're stacking the Yankees and another semi-popular offense or something like that, it's not going to be that difficult to just flip to one of these guys as one of your tournament pitchers because they still give you plenty of upside. Airman Marquez is a solid pitcher. He has about a 24% strikeout percentage this season, 3.55 xFIP. He's been a little bit inconsistent lately, and the Nats have not been a very easy team to strike out since the trade deadline. But when you're just thinking in terms of, what does it look like when this pitcher pitches well, we know Marquez has good strikeout stuff. He's not one of the guys that when he's on top of his game just goes out there and goes 6 innings with 2 strikeouts. He can give you a legitimate good score. So at 2% ownership, I think if you need to save ownership with a pitcher, he makes sense. And then Gray, kind of the same thing. We have Luis Patino right now pulling about 10% ownership at 8,400. Gray only pulling 1% at 8,200. I think that Patino projects better than Gray, and so that's why he's getting more ownership. But they're very, very similar. And obviously we'll talk about Patino more when we get to that game. But Josiah Gray is one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. He has the talent to do well. He's been bad in the majors so far. He has a 5.28 xFIP, 2.86 home runs per 9 innings, 11% walk percentage is too high, but he's got a 23% strikeout percentage. He's got good stuff. And he's getting the Rockies outside of Coors Field. So do I think he's a priority in the sense of I will have, as much Josiah Gray as any other pitcher on the slate? Absolutely not. But is he good enough and in a good enough spot? Is he talented enough? I think in this case, it's different than being good enough. But is he talented enough and in a high enough upside spot for him to be useful if you have popular bats in your lineup? I think absolutely.
I think the more interesting question is going to be, is there any value in bats? This game could go 2 different ways for me. The Nationals are not owned. Juan Soto at 3.5%. The rest of the team is unowned. I still like Juan Soto at that number. The Rockies are owned a bit more than the Nats. Garrett Hampson pulling a ton of ownership, 2,700 in the leadoff spot. After that, we know what we get out of Colorado when they're on the road. Is there a path for you to go to either one of these offenses?
I think they're both sort of just middle of the road for me. This is a pretty high implied run total for the Rockies outside of Coors. We typically don't see it anywhere close to that. And it speaks to the fact that Gray has not been good in the major leagues. Like if you're rostering him, you're just basically saying he has good stuff. He's talented. He probably will be a good pitcher at some point. He's not right now. So the other side of it is that, it is a high upside spot for the Rockies. It's not a particularly good bullpen behind Gray either. So I can see getting there, but also when you think about the things that really bump a team up for me, they're not one of the most likely teams to have success. They're not particularly underowned. They're not facing a popular pitcher, and they're not that inexpensive, excluding Garrett Hampson. So there's not one real metric that's going to bump Colorado up to being like a top stack for me, but it's certainly a high upside spot. And the same can be said for Washington. I think that Marquez is a better pitcher than Gray. I don't think that's really in question, but you do have a left-handed heavy middle of the order. Marquez's strikeout numbers against lefties are not as good as righties this year. We know Soto is great. We know Bell has power. Keibert Ruiz is one of the top hitting prospects in baseball and covers the catcher position. So I think the Nats are okay, but just like with the Rockies, you're not getting much ownership going to Marquez. The Nats aren't one of the highest probability stacks. They're not one of the best value stacks, and they're not really going underowned. So they're both fine in 150 lineups. I could see getting some in 3 max or single entry. They wouldn't be pushing the top for me.
All righty. Anything else for Nats and Rockies?
Nope.
Definitely talking about this next one. At least I think we are. Blue Jays and Twins, 5.4 run implied total for the Jays, 3.8 for the Twins. It's Ryu and Pineda. And again, not really any ownership coming in from a pitching perspective. 6% going to Ryu, no ownership going to Pineda. I'm guessing you're probably somewhere in that same ballpark on Ryu. Happy to have him a little bit. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. It's this slate's really... It's kind of difficult to talk about pitching wise because there's just going to be a lot of pitchers where it's just like, yeah, I like that guy. He's fine. That's how I feel about Ryu here. There's a few guys that, we'll talk about a little bit more where it's like, okay, like I really like this guy and this is why. Ryu, it's more so, I think he's a good enough pitcher. He's got an okay spot against Minnesota. There are strikeouts in this lineup, but I think he's appropriately priced. He's not a great strikeout pitcher, only 20.3% strikeout percentage for the season. So he doesn't compare favorably to a lot of the other guys in his price range in that regard. So it's just one of these guys where it's like, yeah, he's good enough. It's a 3.9 implied run total for Minnesota. I don't mind using him where I have more popular bats, but if I'm choosing pitchers and ownership doesn't matter, Ryu's not going to be at the top of my list.
Okay. Pineda, 1% owned, 5,600. Nope. Yep. Okay. That works for me. And those are the kind of responses that I definitely need on a day like today with 15 games. If it's a nope, let me know it's a nope. I know what's not a nope, and that would be the Blue Jays offense. They are my number 4 overall stack. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of properly owned, but either way, it's still the Blue Jays. I guess the real question is, how do you feel about Pineda being on the opposite side of it? Not necessarily how do you feel about Pineda, but like, is this a spot you want to target for Toronto? Yeah,
I don't think Pineda's any good at this point. He's lost a couple miles an hour off of his fastball. He's only averaging 90.5 miles per hour this year. 201 expected ISO to righties, 184 to lefties going into Toronto. And I mean, this is just an offense that has tons and tons of power top to bottom in this lineup. Jake Lamb is batting 9th. I mean, what was it, like 4 or 5 years ago? He was batting cleanup for the Diamondbacks. Not to say, not to use that as like some point that he's actually a really good hitter, but he does have power and he's hitting 9th. Danny Jansen's got some pop for a catcher, hitting 8th. We know Gurriel is like always one of our favorite tournament options because he's pretty cheap, he's good, and he's buried in the Toronto lineup, so people don't roster him. Dickerson's cheap, batting 6th. This entire lineup just has power. You can stack them in so many different ways. You can cover any position that you need and still have upside. So I still really like Toronto here.
Yeah, you and me both. Happy to get there. No worries about ownership. Like I said, number 4 team overall. Any interest in the Twins? There's a lot of righty power in this lineup against Ryu.
They're sort of middle of the road for me. There is
15th
power
for me, so they are literally middle of the road for me.
Yeah, it's a smaller slate. I would definitely be interested. As is, I see them more, I guess, as like mini stacks because I don't think I'll get to a whole lot of 5-mans, but individually using guys like Buxton, Polanco, Donaldson, Sano, I think makes plenty of sense. They do have a lot of power. And a point Greg has made a lot when we do shows on days that Ryu pitches is that he's really been inconsistent this year, whereas typically him and pitchers with his skill set, it's more so like they don't get blown up, but they don't have big games. Ryu this year has just like had some really bad games and some really good games. He's been a lot more volatile than you would expect. 163 expected ISO to righties. So I don't mind some of these Twins bats, but I don't think they really stand out in the context of the slate.
I think 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to say stand out, but like they're unowned right now.
Yeah.
I'll happily get that all. And I think you would too. Like if you got a 4-man twin stack of the 1 through 4s today, you're not like pushing that one back. So they did stand out just because their lack of ownership, but still as a whole, like I said, 15th. Good for Jays and Twins.
Yep.
Marlins and Pirates. Ooh. What do you think the attendance is on this game today?
I don't think I can speak to that as an Orioles fan who they just keep setting records for least attendance in franchise history.
God, I mean,
they had like 4,000 people in back-to-back games the other day.
That's embarrassing. And I think this one, I can't imagine it's a lot. I mean, at least it's a Friday. If this were like a Wednesday game or something, holy shit.
But like even that, I mean, it's Friday in Miami. I think you have better things to do than watch the Pirates and the Marlins.
Yeah, like literally anything else. Honestly, literally anything else. Yeah. Alicia Hernandez and Will Crow. This is a spot we definitely have to talk. And I clearly typed in a number here incorrectly. I was just like, I get Alicia Hernandez more than the field on every single slate that we play. There's no way I only get him in 1%. Apparently, I only put him in for 1 out for today. He's 22% owned. How do you feel about him against the Pirates?
I feel good. I think he's one of the most obvious value pitching options here. He's 6,800. The Pirates, we know, aren't a good offense. It's a good park to pitch in. The Hernandez for the season has a pretty healthy 23.4% strikeout percentage, 4.05 xFIP, only a 4.4% walk percentage as well. The only sort of like question on Hernandez is that in his 8 starts this season, he's yet to go more than 5 1/3. But I don't find that too concerning because he threw 93 pitches in his last start against Atlanta. That's the most he's thrown this season. He went 4 2/3 in that one, but it was a situation where he was pitching really, really well. He got into trouble in the 5th inning, ended up being pulled, couldn't get out of the inning. The pitch count tells me that, he still might only go 4 or 5 innings if he's inefficient, but or not pitching well. But if he's going to be allowed to throw 93, 95 pitches, then he's going to have some starts where he's able to go 6 innings. And at his price, I'm just not really concerned here. So I like the matchup. I like Hernandez's talent. I like the ballpark. I think he's pretty clearly one of the best pay down options.
That works for me. Will Crow, 9% owned. Doesn't seem like my guy. I'd rather have Hernandez, but does that work for you? Yeah,
it's fine. I mean, it's Miami in Miami. The implied run totals dropped a bit as the day's gone on as well. I initially didn't really... I thought that I would be getting Brady Singer instead of Will Crow because he was $900 less. Then Brady Singer was scratched. So now I'm just going to have, more cheap pitcher exposure to go around, and it's going to make it easier to get the Crow. There's nothing talent-wise that makes him look good. He's got about a 20% strikeout percentage this year, 5 xFIP, 2.06 home runs per 9, 10.5% walk percentage. You're just basically saying, yeah, this guy's facing the Marlins and he's cheap. I'll take my chances. I will say that there's enough value bats on this slate that I think my preferred approach is going to be just getting 2 better pitchers than Will Crow. But if you do need a $6,200 guy, Crow is okay.
That works. I don't want to roster the Marlins bats or the Pirates bats. Do you?
No, you could make some sort of a case for the Marlins, I think, just because Crow is pulling some ownership and they are really inexpensive. Yeah. Sanchez has some power. De La Cruz batting third at 2,800. Brinson's 2,300. Like you can stack Miami and get, Wheeler, Cease, or whatever you want to do at the top. So that's kind of appealing. But again, I just kind of doubt that I get to a whole lot of that.
Okay. I do want to touch on Willie K's question because I think we'll have the same answer. Does Hernandez's 3-point-something home run per 9 versus lefties worry you? Any lefties you want to target from Pittsburgh? It doesn't worry me.
It doesn't me. I mean, he's made 8 starts this year. He hasn't pitched much. If you go back to, so I guess he's been in the league since. Okay, so if you go back to 2019, 219 expected ISO to lefties. Like, yeah, that's not good, but it's not alarming. It's just,
he's not going to give up 3 1/4 home runs to lefties for the rest of his career. I promise.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and to the question, do you want to target Pirates lefties? Sugo's hitting second at 2,800. That's fine. Brian Reynolds is good. That's fine. Moran is fine. But like when you start comparing them to other guys on this slate, Pirates lefties in Miami just aren't going to really move the needle compared to a lot of the other guys that you can get. Like, for example, just a quick example from, you have Brian Reynolds at 4,900, like, okay, or you could just play Joey Gallo at 4,200 in Yankee Stadium. It's just, there's a lot of examples like that on this slate where it's like, yeah, the Pirates guys are fine, but there's also these other 5 people.
Schedule for the rest of the day. MLB Live Before Lock coming up immediately after this. Greg and Terry will take you all the way up to 7:05. Then College Football Live Before Lock with Ben and Matt. They do a great job talking college football. Great Great college football projections on the site. I hope you're using them. MLB top stacks are free today. NFL ownership free for today if you're playing on Sunday. And MMA rankings if you're looking to get into the UFC for tomorrow's card. Really? Is this not done yet? All right, we'll keep going. Rays and Tigers, 5-run implied total for the Rays. 3.5 for the Tigers. Luis Patino and Casey Mize. Patino 10% owned. Casey Mize getting no ownership. Your boy Sean V doesn't like the Luis Patino pivot that you mentioned earlier today. I'm curious what you've got.
The pivot, he's the
ownership to Patino. I guess he was probably pro Josiah Gray in that scenario. Luis Patino is a terrible play per Sean V. How do you feel?
I don't think he's a terrible play. I'm a little concerned by the fact he threw 76 pitches last time out. He went 4 1/3. But again, 4 1/3, that always, it implies to me, and again, I didn't go back and look at this game, but it implies that he might have, been in a situation where guys were on base because they let him start the 5th. It's not like they just, took him out. He threw 73 the start before that, but that was a game where he pitched poorly against Minnesota. Previously, 102, 91. I think that it's a situation where you certainly could see him get pulled earlier than you would like. But overall, it's a good matchup against the Tigers. He's really, really similar to me to Josiah Gray. It's very similar strikeout percentage. He's at 22% for the season, so a point lower than Gray. His xFIP is 1/100th of a point higher than Gray. He's allowed 1.5 home runs per 9. He's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. He's not quite ready for the major leagues yet, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a high ceiling against a team like the Tigers. So I think Patino is fine. I do think he's priced up enough at 8,400 where he's not somebody that I like prioritize tonight. I think that in a lot of lineups, I'm going to just be able to get to that 9 to 10K range and get pitchers that are better. But if I'm in the 8K range, I don't have any issue with Patino.
Mize?
No. Mize, it looks like, and I saw Sean V mention this, and I think it's backed up. It seems like they are limiting him again. 2 innings last time out, 48 pitches. 3 innings the one before that went 34 pitches. We saw this going into the All-Star break, and they had said that they were going to do it again late in the season. So I don't think you can get to Mize just from a depth standpoint, not to mention the matchup is brutal. But I do like Tampa Bay because they're going to get, not only do you get Mize for a couple of innings, who has just been absolutely lit up by left-handed bats this year, but then you're going to get Detroit's bullpen behind them. And my God, Tampa Bay is just running out 8 lefties today. So maybe you see some pinch hitting, but I also don't really know exactly where the pinch hitting would come from. Like, Kiermaier probably just stays in to play defense. They're not going to pinch hit for Mejia, most likely, because he's a switch hitter. Maybe you get a pinch hitter for Brett Phillips, like Yandy Diaz somehow comes in for Phillips, and they move guys around. But overall, I think it's kind of just like you got Joey Wendell bumped up in the order. You got Taylor Walls bumped up to 6th. He's only 3K. I think Tampa Bay looks really, really good here.
Interesting. They are 16th for me, so I'm a little bit lower on the Rays than maybe I should be. I have a lot of teams that basically are just the same. Like they could just as easily be 10th, and it's like I give 1/10 of an at bat more. It's just the way that 30 games or 30 teams is working today. So I'm not overly excited about the Rays. I don't have a problem going there either.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like I think you're wrong if it's like the Rays actively look bad. I don't think it's an issue if it's like 15 teams are within like 1 point of each other kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's a high upside spot. The Tigers do have 3 lefties in their bullpen that all look like they are probably available. The park's not great for hitting, but other than that, I mean, Casey Mize, for whatever time he's going to be in there, he has allowed a 286 expected ISO, 398 expected WOBA to lefties since coming to the major leagues. And then you're getting, a pretty questionable bullpen behind them. So I like the power in Tampa Bay's lineup. I think the pricing is pretty favorable, especially when you have, Taylor Walls and Joey Wendell bumped up in the lineup. So I do like the Rays quite a bit.
All right, let's move it over to Mets and Phillies. 3.5-run implied total for the Mets, 3.9 for the Phils. Taiwan Walker and Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler, the chalk of the day, 38% owned. Well, one of the chalks of the day, along with Chris Sale. I think that Wheeler is properly owned and should be owned quite a bit here, although it is a little scary against the Mets. But I think it's largely warranted at 10-6. How do you feel about Wheeler?
Feel good. He's been one of the best pitchers in baseball. It's a pretty neutral matchup against the Mets. They're not a good offense, slightly below average against right-handed pitching this season. Strikeout percentage around 24%. Wheeler has the second best xFIP on the slate, just edged out by Logan Webb this season. 28.9% strikeout percentage is the second highest. 5.4% walk percentage is one of the lowest. 3/4 of a home run per 9 innings. He's just a really good pitcher in a good spot. The only like knock on Wheeler that I could see on this slate is that he is getting a lot of ownership. Right now, we have him projected to be the second highest owned pitcher on DraftKings, and he's the most expensive pitcher on a slate where there's a ton of pitching talent. So you could certainly sell me on, well, what if I just get over the field on a bunch of the good pitchers that are less expensive and play less Wheeler? I think that's fine. Again, it kind of just comes back to what your lineups look like. If you have more popular bats, then by all means, take a chance on a pitcher that's not quite as good, but that still has a lot of talent. If you're on, like the Minnesota stack or something like that, then there's no real reason to be looking to get away from Wheeler's ownership.
How are you feeling about Walker? Anything interesting? 6% owned seems about right.
Yeah, there's not really much there for him. He's really struggled in the second half. Not entirely sure he's healthy here. He's not really that cheap. I don't like the matchup against the Phillies all that much. Yeah, I don't really have much on Walker.
And I certainly don't have much from an offense perspective here. I have the Phillies 27th and the Mets 30th. Do you have any interest in going to the Mets because of Wheeler's ownership? That's my only question, I guess. Yeah,
not really on this slate. Just it's so big. It's they can. The Mets can score 4 or 5 runs on Wheeler, and Wheeler's, make Wheeler a pretty trash play, and then not even come remotely close to winning the slate. It's different when it's like a 4 or 5 game run. It's like, yeah, okay, 5-6 runs, that puts you in contention. That's probably not going to get it done here. So I just think that there's you can stack so many teams that 1, 2, 3% ownership. I don't really want to be getting to the one against Zach Wheeler.
Well, let's talk about the number one offense on the slate. 6.2 run implied total for the Red Sox, 3.6 for the Orioles. Chris Sale and Keegan Aiken. Sale, the other chalk with Wheeler, 39% owned. I agree with that one as well. I think that he should be one of the 2 highest owned pitchers on the slate. I don't think that Keegan Aiken should be getting any ownership whatsoever. Do you have anything interesting that you want to add for Sale?
Not really. His strikeout rate's down a little bit this season. He's at 27.5%, but that's something I expect to increase going forward. He was out most of the season. He struck out at least 35% of hitters in each of his last 3 years, at least 30% in 5 of his last 6 seasons. The velocity's in line with what we were seeing in, I guess it was 2019. The Orioles are basically an average offense, but Sale clearly an above average pitcher. 3.4 implied run total for the Orioles, and Sale's priced down a little bit at 9,500. So no real issues for me with Sale. He only missed 1 start with COVID, so I'm not expecting him to be limited either. Let me clarify that real quick. I'm not expecting him to be more limited than he was. We'd seen him sort of limited since coming back from his injury, in the sense that they kind of just had a short leash on him and would pull him at 85, 90 pitches. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that again, but I'm not expecting him to be more limited than he already was.
Well, if you don't like Sale, you can at least still stay with Boston. They are the number one stack for today. They are my number one stack. I think they're under-owned, if I'm being perfectly honest. I won all of the Boston in this spot. How do you feel?
Same. I don't think Keegan Aiken's particularly good. I definitely don't think the Orioles bullpen is good. The last Keegan Aiken start's just the perfect example of why you get so much upside against the Orioles. 7-inning game against Toronto. He took a no-hitter through 6 innings, started the 7th inning. By the time the 7th inning was over, Toronto had 11 or 16 runs or something, just because at any time you can just get into this Orioles bullpen where they are completely incapable of getting outs. So it's just, we talk about the bullpens a lot, where you're not typically going to target a spot just because the opposing bullpen is bad, but it sure doesn't hurt when you know that at whatever point Keegan Aiken leaves this game, even if Keegan Aiken somehow pitches well for 6 innings, you still just have those outs of getting 3 innings against the bullpen where you can still just pile on a bunch of runs. So I think Boston looks great. They're not expensive either. The most expensive hitter in the projected lineup. Do we really not have a lineup yet?
No.
Okay. So the most expensive hitter in the projected lineup is Kyle Schwarber at 5K. Cheap team, that should drive the ownership up a bit. Really good spot. But again, you're just going to have so many spots on the slate where you can find low-owned plays. It's not going to be hard to say, okay, I'll take Boston plus a low-owned secondary stack and a low-owned pitcher, or Boston plus 2 low-owned pitchers. You're going to be able to balance out that ownership pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm happy to get to this entire team. I think they look great. I'm also not happy to get to anything from Baltimore.
No, me neither. I mean, Hayes is 2,900. I guess that deserves a mention. Mancini's 3,300 if he's in the lineup. But so many good spots on this slate. It's pretty tough. There's power, 1 through 4 in particular. If Mancini's in, 1 through 6, really 1 through 7 are all fine. Severino's got power if he's in. Santander's got power. But again, there's 29 other offenses.
MLB Deeper Dive is the promo code to get yourself an Awesemo Plus Platinum weekly pass for $29.95. That gets you access to all of the premium content at awesemo.com, including our projections, ownership, Slack, top stacks, top all of those additional tools that we now have. You get access to all of it. Again, use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive. You'll see Nightbot drop the link, but I'm letting you know right now, that is the promo code to get a week for $29.95. We're on to game number 8. Cincinnati Reds, Los Angeles Dodgers, 3.8 run implied total for the Reds, 4.9 for the Dodgers. Luis Castillo and Walker Buehler pulling a grand total between the two of them of 5% ownership. I have at least a little bit of interest in one of these guys. How are you feeling about pitching?
I'm definitely interested in Buehler as a Zach Wheeler pivot. I think he's kind of just like the perfect play where, you know, you do have that Red Sox lineup or the Yankees lineup or whatever, one of these popular stacks, and, you know, you have the money to pay up, but you know, you prefer to go with a lower owned pitcher. Walker Buehler's spot against Cincinnati is more difficult than Wheeler's spot against the Mets. Wheeler has a higher strikeout percentage this season. He's got a better xFIP. You know, I think it's pretty safe to say Wheeler's having the better season, but the ceiling for Buehler is not drastically different than it is for Wheeler, even though he's likely to hit it less often because he's facing the Reds in Great American. The Reds do have Jesse Winker back in the lineup as well, which makes this lineup better. But when you're just thinking, you know, in terms of ceiling, Walker Buehler gives you the same sort of upside that Zach Wheeler does at basically 1/9 the ownership. So I think Wheeler, you know, again, in cash, go Wheeler. In tournaments, if you don't need to save ownership, go Wheeler. But in lineups where you've taken on some ownership with your hitting, I think Walker Buehler is a very, very good pivot away from Zach Wheeler.
Walker Buehler plus 350 to win the NL Cy Young. Crazy. He was leading as of not too long ago. Now it's Scherzer and Corbin Burns. Luis Castillo, I mean, I'm never mad when I get him, but this isn't a good strikeout matchup, and the Dodgers are really good. So today's not that day.
Yeah, same boat. There's just so many. It kind of speaks to the pitching depth on this slate that Castillo is kind of just like a write-off in my mind, because like if you want to go to an $8,800 pitcher that has upside and isn't getting any ownership, you can go to Airman Marquez against the Nats, which, you know, say what you will about Marquez and the Nats, but like it's still better than facing the Dodgers. So, I don't know. Castillo's good, but I just don't. There's like a whole tier of low-owned pitchers that I would rather get to than the guy facing the Dodgers.
I think it's okay to get to some Dodgers bats. I don't want to get to a lot, though. I'm not trying to target Castillo. Any Dodgers that I'd have, like I think they're worth, 5% ownership or something like that today. It feels like a tough spot to want to target them. It's a great part. Everything fits perfectly other than Castillo.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One, it's a relatively low probability matchup against Castillo because he's good, but also the Dodgers are expensive. Corey Seager's cheap. He's really the only guy on this team pulling ownership. But other than that, you have $5K plus price tags on Betts, Muncy, both Turners. Will Smith comes in at $4,700. Even Bellinger's at $4,200. So like that in and of itself isn't a big issue. We talk all the time about liking to pay up to be contrarian with offenses. Where it's an issue, and Greg pointed this out this morning, is when you have a slate like this where so many different teams are underpriced, it's different because there's a very good chance that there's a couple of just cheap offenses that do really well because there are so many of them. It would just be surprising if that doesn't happen. And so it's likely to put you in a situation where even if the Dodgers go out there and score 9-10 runs, you still sort of end up in a situation where it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now I need Eliezer Hernandez to outscore Dylan Cease for me to have a chance because, these other offenses that were really cheap scored just as many runs. So that's kind of my biggest concern outside of, the matchup with Castillo, is just that there's a lot of very high upside offenses that across the board are like $500 to $1,000 less expensive per batter.
I'm not even going to ask you about Reds bats. It's just not going to be that day against Walker Buehler. Rangers and White Sox. 3.7 run implied total for the Rangers, 5 for the White Sox. Taylor Hearn and Dylan Cease. 4% ownership coming to Hearn. I got him at 5, so sure. 23% ownership coming to Dylan Cease. I have him a little bit lower than that. I understand why he's getting some ownership, but I feel like 23% is a little high.
I think it should be higher.
Interesting. Go for it.
So he's 9,100, which I think is important here because that's a pretty big gap off of Zach Wheeler and, Walker Buehler at the top. So I understand, Wheeler's getting a lot of ownership. Sales in this price range, he's getting a lot. For one, I don't think Dylan Cease, or I don't think Chris Sale is 1.5 times as likely to outscored Dylan Cease. But even more so, I think there's a lot of lineups where you can kind of improve your ceiling by saving $1,500 off of Wheeler, getting an extra bat or two in there, and going to Dylan Cease, who has the highest strikeout percentage on this slate at 31.1%. He's 2 points higher than Wheeler for the season, 3.9 xFIP. Gives up some power, walks a little bit too many guys, but it's a really good matchup against Texas as well. We have the roof closed in Texas, so that plays in Cease's favor. 3.6 implied run total for the Rangers. I just think that the gap, the salary gap is a little bit too wide, especially for all the ownership going to Wheeler. So I do really like getting to more Cease here. I think it's going to make the overall upside of your lineups better, because while Wheeler is certainly a better pitcher than Dylan Cease, I don't think Wheeler has that his ceiling is drastically higher. You could make the argument that Wheeler's likely to go deeper into the game, since he pretty much always goes deep into games and the White Sox don't really have anything to play for at this point. But still, from a strikeout standpoint, I just think that it's pretty comparable between the two. So I do really like Cease. On the other side with Hearn, I don't like Hearn. I think it's a tough matchup against the White Sox. He has about a 20% strikeout percentage as a starter. He is fully stretched out though. He's gone 6 and 7 innings in his last couple of starts. Whereas earlier I really liked Brady Singer at 5,300. I think Hearn is kind of the guy at 5K where I don't like him, but he just kind of falls into some lineups if I need a 5K pitcher. Like I would rather go to Hearn at 5K than Pineda against the Blue Jays, for example.
Okay. How are you feeling about the White Sox bats against Hearn? And before we do anything, 71 likes, 560 people. Hit that thumbs up, everybody. We're trying to get north of 100 here. Come on now. I have the White Sox third overall, 11th in terms of leverage. There's a lot of righty power here up against the lefty and Hearn. I think it looks pretty solid.
Yeah, I think it looks like a pretty good spot. They are pulling some ownership. You do have 5 guys in this lineup projected for between 10 and 12% ownership on DraftKings. Nothing higher than that, though. And, it is still a lineup that you can use some other guys to balance it out. Tim Anderson's expensive, so he's only getting 7%. The bottom of the order is not getting much either. Not that you really want to go to those guys, but Anderson, Robert, Abreu, Grandal, Jimenez, Moncada, all pretty solid options here. Hearn for the season has allowed a 187 expected ISO with a 20% strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters. So I think it's a pretty good spot. I think again, there's a lot of good spots on this slate, but I have no issue with the White Sox.
I do have an issue with the Rangers, though. I don't want to roster them.
No, me neither. They're not even that inexpensive anymore. Like, they're still cheap, but Tavares is up to 3,100 as opposed to 2K flat. Nate Lowe, who's one of the only guys I typically roster on this team, is up to 4,500. Adolis Garcia is more expensive than every hitter on the Red Sox except for Kyle Schwarber. So it's kind of a difficult one to get to.
5.4 run implied total for the Brewers, 3.6 for the Cubs. Adrian Hauser and Zach Davies. No ownership to Davies, 9% going to Hauser. I think that's about right here against an absolutely terrible Cubs team. Are you getting to Adrian Hauser? Not a lot of strikeouts here for Hauser.
So real quick, someone asked in chat if Dylan Cease is on a pitch count. I haven't seen anything to suggest he would be. He threw 71 pitches last start, but he got lit up in that start. Gave up 7 runs in 2 2/3 against Boston. That wasn't like we only want him to throw 70 pitches. That was just like, get this guy out of the game. I'm tired of watching him pitch. Prior to that, 98 pitches, 108, 95, 102. Unless we've gotten some report that I haven't seen that he's going to be limited, there's no real reason to think that he is. As far as Hauser goes, he's another one where I don't really like Hauser, but he's 7,100. There's not a whole lot around him. Like, you have Hernandez at 6,800, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot to sort of fill that price range. Everyone else is, 8 to 9K or even higher. The Cubs only have a 3.6 implied run total. Hauser's not a great strikeout pitcher on his own, only a 17.8% strikeout percentage this year, but the Cubs do have the highest strikeout percentage in baseball since the trade deadline. He does get to face a pitcher, which of course is nice. And most importantly, he's going deeper into games now. For a lot of the season, the Brewers were limiting him to, a few innings, but 6 innings his last time out, 103 pitches, 9 inning complete game, 100 pitches before that, 94 pitches 3 starts ago, 104 5 starts ago. So you're seeing him just throw a lot more pitches now. I think Hauser is a perfectly fine value option, even though he's not the best strikeout pitcher.
Really curious to get your thoughts here on the Brewers bats against Zach Davies. They are my number 7 stack overall. They are the second worst negative leverage stack that I have. They are the second worst negative leverage stack in our top stack tool. How much are you paying attention to that? How much do you want to target Brewers bats against Davies?
It's I don't really feel strongly either way. I think they're a very, very good value stack, and that's why you're seeing ownership get there. It's not like it's a bad spot. They have a 5.5 implied run total. They have plenty of power in this lineup, but it's also a really good value stack when you have Colton Wong leading off at 3,900. The most expensive hitter in the lineup is Eduardo Escobar at 4,600. That's clearly a perfectly fine salary. Yelich is cheap. Narvaez is reasonably priced. Jace Peterson's batting sixth at 2K flat with multi-position eligibility. This is a team that you can fit pretty much whatever you want around it, and so that's why they're valuable, because it's a good spot. Not the best spot on the slate, but a good spot. And the rest of your lineup, because you're able to get the pitching you want or the one-offs that you want or the secondary stack that you want, the rest of your lineup is going to make the lineup as a whole look so good that I think the Brewers are a good option. But again, you're going to want to pay attention to what the rest of your lineup looks like, what the ownership there looks like. Make sure you're doing something to differentiate if you go to Milwaukee, because I do fully expect them to get ownership here. Looking individually at their hitters, they have five guys. Well, four, not including Hauser. They have four guys between 11 and 16%. But even that, it goes back to what we were saying at the top, where if this were like a 6-game slate and Yelich is getting 35% and Narvaez is getting 25%, that's different than getting 15 and 11%. It's not that difficult to counteract that kind of ownership.
No, not at all. I'm with you. They seem fine. I'm not as worried about the negative leverage on a slate like this. I'm certainly not going to the Cubs, however.
Yeah, I'm there with you. It's just a big slate. I don't mind Schwindel. I don't mind Happ. I guess actually I kind of don't mind the Cubs. They're not a team I want a lot of. I don't think they're a high probability team, but I do think they offer value. So like, for example, if you have a build where you paid up for a couple of pitchers, you have a popular, main stack, and a lot of people are going to be using the Brewers for value, I think you can still go to the Cubs here. Like Wilson Contreras is a good play at 3,900. Schwindel's fine at 34. Ortega, Happ are cheap. Wisdom has power. You have a 2K 6-hitter, just like you do on the Brewers. So I don't think I get a lot of the Cubs, but I do think in your more popular lineups, they're a reasonable value, like secondary stack.
Oh, that works. Wasn't expecting that. Good to know.
Plus Hauser's getting some ownership.
That's fair. All right, we'll keep it moving here. And thank you guys for hitting that thumbs up. We're north of 100, so I like to see it. Astros and Diamondbacks, 5.6 run implied total for the Astros, 3.7 for the Diamondbacks. Is it Bilac or Bilac?
Bilac, I believe. I was more confused because someone in chat just said he can get the same number of points as Wheeler.
I mean, that is a true statement.
Yeah, but it involves Wheeler scoring like 8.
Yeah. I mean, look, it is not false. It is just not true either. Brandon Bielak and Madison Bumgarner, neither guy getting any ownership. I think that you can make a case for Bielak at least a little bit as a pay down option for 5K, but the problem is he's going to throw like 3 innings, 4 at most, and it's you're probably just going to need more on a day like today. So I can't really justify it.
Yeah, I think you could make a case if this were a smaller slate and like all the bats you wanted to go to were super expensive, or if it was like yesterday's 3-game main slate where you were rostering long relievers hoping they pitched. That's you can make that case for 3 innings of Bielak, but here it's like assuming he's going to go 3 or 4 innings. Like, okay, maybe he gets you 12, 13 points. That's good for his salary, but there's so many good pitchers on this slate and so many cheap bats. There's just a very good chance that the winning lineups have, 2 pitchers with 20 plus points, and then their offenses still did well, and they're able to do that because the offenses were cheap. So I think the opportunity cost is pretty high. And again, if I'm going to a 5K pitcher, the reason I like Hearn the most out of those guys, I don't like Hearn, but if you are going in that range, Pineda's got the brutal matchup against Toronto. Hearn's matchup against the White Sox, I don't think is quite as scary, even though it's still bad. But the difference for me between Hearn and Bielak, even though Bielak has the better matchup, is that Hearn can give you 6 or 7 innings when he's pitching well. As far as I know, if Bielak's pitching well, he's still going like 4 innings.
I can't imagine you're going to Bumgarner against the Astros. I
am sure as hell not going to Bumgarner against the Astros.
I can't imagine that you're going to the Astros against Bumgarner. They are my biggest negative leverage team. Bregman pulling 20% ownership as warranted given some of these prices. So I like Houston quite a bit. Here.
I thought you said you can't imagine that I'm going to Houston against Bumgarner. I was just like, no. Yeah, I'll go to Houston.
I mean, I might have said that, but that's not what I meant.
Okay. Yeah.
Yay, Houston.
I'll go to Houston against almost anybody. Bumgarner certainly fits into that. He's only struck out 18.9% of righties this year, 192 expected ISO. You're getting a lot of righties for the Astros. No Yordan Alvarez is an issue because not only would you like him to be in the lineup, but there's a pretty good chance that Jake Myers or Jose Siri losing at bat later in the game to Yordan Alvarez. Again, not something that's super actionable. Like, you don't want to just completely not play those guys, but just keep that in mind when you're getting excited for Jake Myers, like 8th inning at bat with the bases loaded, that Yordan Alvarez is coming out of the dugout. So that's, a little bit of an issue, but still the lineup's good enough. You have Altuve, Bregman, Gurriel, Tucker, and Correa 1 through 5. Altuve is the only hitter in this lineup that's 5K or higher. And then the bottom of the order is just straight value. You have 2 minimum salary guys in Siri and Castro. Not that I'm heavily recommending Castro, but Gonzalez just barely above minimum salary. Myers is cheap. So Houston does look good. Pulling up now their individual ownership, because I wouldn't be surprised if it's skewed a little bit. And 20% going to Bregman, Tucker at 13, Altuve at 13, Siri and Castro at 10. Castro, I guess, just because he's 2K, but it's still, you can go to Gurriel, you can go to Correa at a little bit lower ownership, and it's not going to be that difficult to offset the rest of this team.
Yeah, and Bregman at 20% ownership at 4,400 is right. Like, I don't have a problem with that ownership at all. It's high, but if anybody's going to be owned at 20% against a lefty in this spot, like it all makes sense to me.
Yeah, and he's 4,200. I think he's pretty easily like the top third. If he's not the top third base option, he's like top 3.
Yep, no doubt. I don't have any interest in going to the Diamondbacks, especially now that Ketel Marte is not in the lineup, and he might be the only actual good player on the team. Sorry, Dalton Varsho, but
they got Cole Calhoun back, but no, I'm good.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
Wow, Varsho is 5,100.
Yeah, good luck with that one today. I got to talk a little bit about the sponsor of this show. We have 4 games to go. Before I touch on Jock Market, here's the implied run total on the next 7 of the next 8 teams I'm going to read. 4.4, 4.6, 4.7, 4.3, 4.3, 4.7, 4.3. This is going to look pretty similar on the way through. And the Braves are, oddly enough, the team with the lowest implied total after that. Weird stuff. Anyway, Jock Market, presenting sponsor. Fantasy sports is now a stock exchange. You can buy and sell shares of your players in real time for real money. NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. It's a very interesting mechanism. You can short players now. You can basically bet against you can bet for them to fail, which is pretty fun, honestly. We don't have that mechanism anywhere else. You buy your shares in the pregame IPO phase, and then let's just say you take a leadoff hitter and he goes yard. You can sell those shares immediately, lock in a little bit of profit, or try to hold on, hope that he goes a little bit more. Anyway, Awesemo is the promo code. Head to the App Store, download the app, use that promo code when you sign up, get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's Jock Market, the presenting sponsor of this show. Happy to have them. 4 more to go, man. We are moving through this one. And now we're just going to talk about the same thing over and over again. Royals and Mariners. 4.4 run implied total for the Royals, 4.6 for the Mariners. An unowned Chris Flexen going for Seattle. I have John Heasley going for the Royals. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, don't really know who that is, and it's not Brady Singer, but that is what I'm seeing.
He is not in DraftKings salary file, to my knowledge.
Yeah, he's not in the player pool.
Perfect. So we don't have to worry about that. And I don't think we're rostering Chris Flexen.
Not planning on rostering Chris Flexen. He's an okay pitcher in terms of run prevention, just doesn't really give you the strikeout upside that you would want. Kansas City doesn't strike out a lot anyway, so and he's not really that cheap. So yeah, nothing really pitching wise here.
I don't mind Seattle as an unowned stack here. They're 11th for me, 3rd in leverage. There's something there. It's, you get a Cal Raleigh at 2,400. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm not excited about it, but they're a team that I would expect to have some 5-mans of. I don't know what else to say about them.
Yeah, the issue I have, because I do think it's a pretty good spot. They're not getting any ownership right now. The issue is, again, that the guys that you want are actually pretty expensive. Yeah. Not even necessarily in like concrete terms, but just compared to the alternatives. Like, do I think Mitch Haniger at 5,500 is a drastic overpay for his talent? Not really. Do I think it's a drastic overpay when every single hitter on Boston is at least $500 less expensive? Yeah, I think that's kind of a problem. And then the same thing happens when you have Kyle Seager at 5,300, France is at 4,800. You can still get to this team, and it's a pretty high upside spot. You can use Jared Kelenic batting 6th as a value option that isn't bad. You mentioned Raleigh batting 9th at 2,400, but I do think you're going to end up sort of sacrificing elsewhere. So that's one thing that could kind of hold me back on Seattle.
Any justification for the Royals? They're probably just as good of a stack as the Mariners as far as I'm concerned, but they get a little bit of ownership.
I think the Mariners are the better stack. I think they have a better matchup. I think they have more power, but Kansas City's a lot cheaper. And so I think that's why you're getting some ownership there. I don't mind using them, as some value. We have them with a 5% chance of being the top value stack. That's basically in line. That's about as high as it gets on the slate outside of Miami at 17%. And they are getting, a little bit of ownership. So not a priority for me, but I do think if you need some value, $2,600 Santana, $3,300 Benintendi are both reasonable value options. Salvador Perez, of course, is always one of the top catching options.
This is a game that I think you can just kind of safely cross through and hope that nothing bad happens.
Yeah, I kind of just think it's one of those games, and there's been a few on this slate where, and it happens, I guess, a lot on big slates, but there's several plays where I'm like, oh, if I look and they're in my lineup, I'll be, pretty happy. And even if they do well and I don't have them, I'll be pretty bummed because I thought they were good plays. But at the same time, I already can just see where it's like, oh, okay, I really like Mitch Haniger. What $4,500 outfielders am I taking out to be able to get to Mitch Haniger at a high level? And it's just like, okay, well, that's going to be really hard to do. So that's kind of how I feel about both sides of this game.
Cardinals and Padres, similar run totals to everything we just said. 4.7 for the Cardinals, 4.3 for the Padres. Miles Michaelis and Vince Velasquez. There's a lot of alliteration in the pitching names. A lot of uninterest in the pitchers. Michaelis is fine at 6,400 because at least he's not expensive. Vince Velasquez is 6,900, and I guess there's some strikeout upside here, although there's not a lot of strikeouts in the Cardinals lineup. Neither guy getting any ownership, and I don't really think that they should.
No, I agree. I was getting caught up on why you refuse to do NFL shows. But
I do way more NFL shows than anybody was ever expecting. I do more NFL shows on our NFL Sunday than anyone else does for the company.
But yeah, as far as pitching goes here, nothing really to see. Michaelis doesn't strike out a lot of guys, and in a limited sample this year has not pitched well in terms of run prevention either. Not too concerned about that, but the strikeout stuff is enough for me to not be interested there. Velasquez been garbage, released by Philadelphia. Now he's on the Padres. For a team that we thought was going to be a real World Series contender, did not see them using Vince Velasquez and Jake Arrieta within the same week in September while competing for a playoff spot, but not interested in either guy here.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. I got the Padres 9th. I was hoping they would rank a little bit higher, but Michaelis is a tough matchup. He doesn't get bombed like that totally. So the power for the Padres works for me. I'm not overly enamored, and I don't think that I'll be getting to the Cardinals. Although that top of the order looks kind of interesting, or at least Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado looks really interesting. What do you want to do from an offense perspective here?
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the offense here. But again, it's just with so many other good stacks, I'm not sure how much I'll get to. I guess I would say that if you're someone building lineups and you want to play the Cardinals, you want to play the Padres, but especially the Cardinals, that's fine. I think that's a good play. I don't know if I personally will end up with it. I haven't built lineups yet, and there's obviously a lot of ways it can go. But Vince Velasquez has been bad. He gives up a lot of power, and the Cardinals have a lot of it. They're also very cheap. The most expensive hitter in the lineup on DraftKings is Arenado at 4,500. Goldschmidt, O'Neill, Arenado all have power. Carlson's really cheap. Molina's a catcher, batting 5th. That's kind of all you need. So it's a pretty good spot for the Cardinals. And then on the other side with San Diego, I don't love the matchup here. Michaelis has struggled in his limited sample this year, but what really stands out is that you have Jurickson Profar batting leadoff at 2,100. Then Tatis and Machado are really good. Frazier's only 3,200. And then you get Tommy Pham batting 5th, or a $2,800 Austin Nola batting 7th, kind of just skipping over Hosmer. But the point being, this is a stack that is actually pretty cheap for the amount of talent in it against what I think is at best a mediocre Miles Michaelis.
Ooh, it breaks my heart that he's mediocre, but you're right. He's mediocre.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This feels like a game where I'm just grabbing individual bats. I can't get behind it at all. I don't have anything else for Cards or Padres.
No, me neither.
Angels and Athletics. Kyle Tyler is what I've got in for the Angels. Cole Irvin for the A's. I don't imagine we're going to Kyle Tyler against the A's if that's legitimate. I don't get the sense we're going to Cole Irvin either, although at least it's against the Angels. Are we doing anything with pitching here?
Even Emacs going at you in chat.
Wait, really?
Well, I mean, I read it as a joke about your $1 head-to-heads being posted.
No, I post 1, 2s, and 3s.
Yeah.
As many as I can. The max you can post.
Yeah. Anyway, so Angels and A's, right?
Yes, Angels and A's.
I'm kind of interested in Cole Irvin if he's not going to get any ownership, because right now he's projected for basically none. I don't think he's very good, but I think the Angels are pretty bad. And I think that, again, like, I don't think you're going to need a ton of cheap pitching on this slate, but everyone's going to like the same couple of pitchers, Hernandez and Hauser. If you need a lower owned guy, I think Irvin works as the pivot in that range, I guess is how I should put it. So again, so I don't like him. I like him in the same way that like I like Josiah Gray versus Luis Patino. I just think that he probably wins out of this group often enough to be used as a pivot if you need it for ownership reasons. But otherwise, I would just rather be getting to Hernandez. As far as the Angels go, it looks like a bullpen game there. So nothing really to say.
Yeah, Emax knows what he's doing. He's gathering up some fish.
I was going to say that I was impressed by your restraint, not just like firing off head-to-head challenges like I would be.
I don't know. I mean, look, it's all out there. 1s, 2s, 3s. I know what I'm doing. I'm in a lot bigger than that too, but I'm going to happily just take everybody's money at the bottom pretty easily per everything I've ever seen in my Roto tracker, at least. Just easy at the bottom, man. I haven't played nearly enough volume to be ripped out of those stakes. I'm going to take every cent until I can't. I got the Angels 12th, which is incredible. I have the A's 20th. I don't want to go to offense here.
Yeah, I don't want to go to the Angels. I think the A's are fine because they are a really high upside offense, but they run into that same issue we talked about with the Dodgers, we talked about with the Mariners. It's not that I have a problem paying $5,500 for Olsen or $6,000 for Marte or even $5,500 for Chapman if he's in. It's that the opportunity cost on this slate is pretty high when you get so many good offenses that are drastically less expensive and are still relatively low owned. So that's going to make it tough for me to prioritize Oakland, even though they are a good offense.
We close it out. Giants and Braves, 4.3 run implied total for the Giants, 3.3 for the Braves. Logan Webb, Ian Anderson. Webb, 13% owned. Not sure I like that at 9,800, although I sort of understand why it's happening. No ownership going to Ian Anderson. I'd actually be okay getting a little bit there. I'd rather just not really have much of Webb or Anderson or really anything in this game. Is it different for you?
I like Webb. The Braves at the moment have the low or tied with the Pirates for the lowest implied run total on this slate. Logan Webb has been excellent this year. I think one of the bigger surprises in baseball, 26.1% strikeout percentage. He has the best xFIP on the slate, just edging out Zach Wheeler. He's allowed 0.65 home runs per 9 innings. 6.5% walk percentage is solid. Pitching in San Francisco. The Braves have strikeouts in this lineup. The issue is that they have like a 200 ISO, but Webb doesn't give up power. The park mitigates power. And the Braves projected lineup also has six right-handed bats in it, including Ian Anderson. Against righties this year, Webb has been dominant, 28.8% strikeout percentage, sub 100 expected ISO, 259 expected WOBA. And he's, there's no pitch count issues or anything like that. You wouldn't think. 81 pitches last time out in 6 innings, 85 in 7 innings the start before. So I think more so the issue is like, he's efficient and they just turn it over to the bullpen after 7 innings. But I don't think he's like getting pulled at 80 pitches if it's only the 5th inning. We've seen him throw 92, 98 pitches 3 and 4 starts ago. So I think you can get 7 innings from Webb here. He's really good. He's not getting that much ownership. I don't like him as much as I like Cease at a cheaper salary. I don't like him as much as I like Sale or Wheeler, but all those guys are getting more ownership as well.
The highest projected guy the highest guy coming out of my model from the sim odds in this game is Tommy La Stella at 5%. I'm dodging offense here. What about you?
Pretty much the same. The Giants are kind of interesting to me because I'm a little questionable on Ian Anderson. He's made 3 starts since coming back from injury. Did not strike out a single batter in the first 2. Picked up a lot of strikeouts against Miami in 5 innings in the 3rd one. But even that game, it was kind of just like he was battling his way through. His command wasn't where you would want it to be. Even the Braves broadcasters were speculating he might still be dealing with some of that shoulder issue that held him out. So the Giants are a good enough offense where I think there's a slightly higher chance than normal that Anderson just gets lit up here, but I don't really know what to do with that on a slate this big. I'm not like allocating a lot of my resources to hoping Ian Anderson is still hurt, basically.
All right. Well, let's sum this all up then. Favorite stacks for the day before we turn this one over to Live Before Lock.
Boston, Toronto, then it gets kind of like everybody else.
Yeah. Red Sox, Yankees, White Sox are my top 3 right now. That could change a little bit. Nats, criminally underowned, I think. Wheeler, Sale. I know you like Cease a lot. Is there anybody we're missing from a pitching perspective?
Yeah, Wheeler, Sale, Cease. Again, I like Bueller as a tournament pivot off of Wheeler if you need to save some ownership. I like Eliezer Hernandez at 6,800 as well. Me and everyone else. That's not really a hot take.
There we go, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Don't go anywhere. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next. Stay on this stream. You don't have to do anything. In a couple more minutes, some other people will be talking from Awesemo.com. I believe it's Greg and Terry, or is it Eric and Terry? Greg and Terry. I was right the first time. Greg and Terry coming up next. Stay here. It's MLB Live Before Lock.
It is the Awesemo MLB Live Before Lock show, sponsored by Jock Market. Sorry for the couple minute delay there. That was on my computer's end. So we're about to start the show. We're in Zoom. Tyler's like, he's asking me, are you guys ready to go? And then Zoom just quits. He goes, it's time to update. We need to update right now. It's like, no, can we wait? Can we wait, Zoom? It didn't even be the prompt where it's like, do you want to update later? It's just like, no. Automatically, we're updating this second. Now is the time to update. But at least as Terry pointed out, it wasn't the least opportune time. It would have been much worse had we started the show and then it started to update after. But either way, certainly it was a little bit of a hindrance. That's why we started a couple minutes late. But Terry, how are you doing? How do you feel about this giant 15-game slate?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm not fighting the first battle in the AI war like you were just then, so that's good. I'm doing better there. I like the slate. I think it's pretty interesting. We've got a bunch of pitching on the table, a couple really good pitchers in like interesting, kind of tight, kind of tough spots. A couple guys that I think are like maybe a tier down in terms of talent, but really, really good spots. So it's a wide open board, and we've got some broken prices to talk about too. So I'm psyched. I think it's a good slate.
Yeah, and there's also some differences because Adam and I did a strategy show this morning, and oftentimes a lot of the stuff is kind of the same between the strategy show, then you go to deeper dive live before lock, but it's going to be different because earlier in the day, Chris Sale, we assumed he was starting, but he was not confirmed as starting. So as a result, it kind of made some of the pitcher data a little wonky because he wasn't in the player pool. Chris Sale is now the single most popular pitcher on the slate where we have him. Let me make sure I have the most recent run of ownership here, except he is picking up over 40% ownership on DK, looking at 44.5%, over on FanDuel 22.5. So I think that's the good starting point. Chris Sale coming off the COVID list, only had to miss one start, although he wasn't exactly throwing 100 plus pitches before he went on the COVID list. What do you make of his workload coming into today? Do you think he's a safe play, and do you think the ownership is warranted?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Chris Sale going up against this Orioles lineup. We know that they're a little bit better against left-handed pitching. We've talked about it a few different times, but it's Chris Sale going up against this Orioles lineup. They've still got a 23.9% strikeout rate on the season, which is below average, kind of around the middle of the league, but below the exact middle. They create runs 7% better than average, so they're a reasonably talented offense against left-handed pitching, but it's Chris Sale. I don't really care that it's a somewhat decent team on the other side. I think he can go into this start, and he doesn't need to throw 100 pitches here. He can carve this team up a few times over in a nice efficient 5-inning start. I would question maybe there's not as much upside toward like the quality start bonus if he doesn't go 6. That becomes the concern on the FanDuel slate. But where we're only concerned about strikeouts, wins, and pitching cleanly, I think he's perfectly fine here. The question becomes, is he worth that 42% ownership on the DraftKings slate at 9,500? I think the price is great, but that's why he's getting all that popularity. For me, I'd probably end up under the field. I typically, as we've talked about a bunch of different times, end up under those big inflated numbers on a lot of these guys. I like to spread out to some of the mid-range, and I think there's a substantial mid-range on this slate. So I think I would be under the field's number, but I do really like the opportunity for Chris Sale.
Yeah, and it is a lot of ownership, and there are other pivots here. So earlier in the day, Adam and I, we didn't have in the data. We were kind of prognosticating what we thought his ownership could be. I had guessed at the time 35 to 40%. I think Adam said it was going to be 25%, and that was DK predictions, and now we've got him, just so even above what I thought, and I was kind of on the high end with him being 44.5% projected ownership. I understand because of the price point at 9,500. I think that he warrants a lot of exposure still. There's just a lot of guys to get here as pivots. Mm-hmm. We've got Dylan Cease has come down in ownership specifically because of Chris Sale. Cease was projected to be chalk earlier in the day. Sale kind of at a comparable price point on DK, and that's brought down the ownership for Cease quite a bit. But I think in general, we could kind of lump these guys together in between DK and FanDuel, where we could look at Zach Wheeler, Dylan Cease, Walker, Buehler. Of this group of guys, who do you think makes for the best pivot off of Sale?
So just pulling up our board to look at some of those ownership marks, I know he's in one of the tougher spots. I know that it's a pay up, not a pay down or like a level move, but I just love the idea of getting to Walker Buehler when nobody else is on him. I'll take him even up against a very, very good Reds lineup. Guy just pitches deep into every game. He's fourth in the league in innings pitched. Wheeler's first in the league in innings pitched. He's got 25 quality starts in 29 starts. That leads the league by far. Wheeler's tied for seventh with 18. The two of them were very, very comparable. I wrote about them kind of together in a paragraph, and I don't usually do it that way. I usually separate everybody unless they're pitching against one another sometimes. But I thought that those two at 10-2, 10-6 on DK and similar pricing on FanDuel, I think were just really, really interesting. So I'd look at Buehler, even with the bad start. You just get him at so much positive leverage. He owns a third of the amount of his probability of being a top 2 on DK. That's enough for me, enough reason to go there. The Reds, like I said, it's a very good offense against right-handed pitching. They are sitting a 190 ISO, a 4.24% home run rate, and they create runs 7% better than average. They strike out 23.1% of the time against righties. That's around the middle of the league. So there might be a few strikeouts there. It might be a bad spot for Buehler, but when nobody goes to a really, really good pitcher, a really good player, I like to be there. So I think he would be my move there.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really just a factor of ownership. Points per dollar. Is Walker Buehler better play than Chris Sale? No. Is he better play than Zach Wheeler? No. But he's picking up just a fraction of the ownership. Walker Buehler is projected for 4% ownership on DK. Chris Sale, 44%. So is Sale likely to outscore Buehler today? Absolutely. Is he 10 times more likely to outscore him? No, probably not. And then over on FanDuel, it's a similar type situation, but actually even more ridiculous at the gap in ownership. We've got Walker Buehler projected for 1% ownership on FanDuel compared to Chris Sale at 22.5. So the question really becomes when you're comparing the ownerships, do you think on FanDuel that if you play this slate out 20 times, that Chris Sale outscores Walker Buehler 19 of those times? And then the same thing, but out of 10 slates, does Chris Sale outscore Buehler 9 out of the 10 on DK? And the answer to me is no. The ownership gap is a little bit too wide. So I agree. I think just based on the really low ownership, Buehler is worthwhile to get to. Are there any of these guys that you don't particularly like between Buehler, Sale, Wheeler, and Cease?
No, I would honestly play any one of those guys, especially if we're talking an ownership vacuum. Once we start bringing the ownership back into it, it becomes a matter of just ranking them. But I like all four of those guys. I think Cease is in a spectacular spot, 31 and change percent strikeout rate, pitching excellent throughout the season. He still puts too many guys on base. He still allows a little bit of quality contact. But against that Texas team, I don't really worry about Dylan Cease here. I think he pitches pretty clean, has one of the better upsides for strikeouts on the day. And then Wheeler, like I mentioned, just all that quality that you get out of him, all that reliability, the depth, the shot at a win, the shot at a quality start. He's got a pretty good strikeout rate on the season as well. He's just been pitching excellent all season long. He's going up against the Mets that, you look at the names in that lineup and they should be a better baseball team. They should be a bunch of guys who have a bunch of better numbers than what they've done this season, but we have to judge them on what they've done in the stat lines all season long. And I think it's a good spot for Wheeler, who's striking out 28.9% of hitters, only walks 5.4%, has a 2.88 xFIP, a 5% barrel rate. And the best number on the board, 28.9% hard hit percentage for the season. That's fantastic. So I like the spot for Wheeler as well.
Yeah, and just some questions in the YouTube chat just to clarify. Chris Sale is still the cash game play. I mean, it's Chris Sale, and the price is egregiously wrong, particularly on DraftKings. $9,500 for Sale. As concerned as we might be about, all right, is he going to be limited? Is there going to be pitch counts? His velocity is down a little bit from a few years ago. His strikeout rate is still absurdly high, even if it isn't the same as it was a few years ago. And he still should probably be priced somewhere around $11,000 this matchup on DK. FanDuel, the price is up a little bit higher, but still $10,000 is also an incorrect price. So would you agree Chris Sale is still the cash game play here?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you get Chris Sale at a broken price, you just kind of thank them and take it. And just looking at his game log from the starts that he made in August and in the first part of September, 5 innings, 8 strikeouts in his debut, 5 innings, 5 strikeouts, 5 1/3, 8 strikeouts. His last start before he hit the COVID list against Tampa, 3 2/3, 6 strikeouts, gave up some runs in that game and got chased, but still struck out 6 and only 3 2/3. Dude doesn't need to pitch 6 innings to strike out 10 hitters in this game. So yeah, I think that just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then I think that kind of covers some of the high end guys. Unless do you have a real strong desire to play Logan Webb? He was somebody who early in the day we thought maybe he could be a kind of an okay looking contrarian option, but he's going to be a little bit more popular now. 12% over on DK, over on FanDuel. He's projected for 7% ownership. To me, honestly, with this many games, he just doesn't quite make the cut. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think for me that would be the same. I do like a pitcher who's been that good throughout the season. If you could get him at 5% ownership, 9,500, not a bad price to pay, but I didn't like the spot going up against the Braves anyway. So, yeah, I just don't need to go to him. There's enough pitching in that tier, and then there's some guys that cost less that I'd like to go to. So I agree. I just don't really have the need to throw him up against Atlanta. I think odds are he shuts down that offense pretty well, but maybe doesn't have a monster start that compares to the potential of some of these other guys. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
And then if you go down in price tier a little bit on DK and FanDuel, there are some guys that I do think make for good contrarian options. Not anybody that I think we want to get into like 20% of our lineups, but Herman Marquez, 9,200 on FanDuel, only project for 0.5% ownership. I think that he's in a really favorable spot today. On DK, 8,800, he's project for 3.9% ownership. Going against the Washington Nationals, the Nationals, it's a hitter-friendly park. However, keep in mind, Herman Marquez usually makes half his starts in Coors Field, so it's not favorable relatively. It's still a park upgrade for Herman Marquez. He's a talented pitcher. Basically, you have to work around Juan Soto. You have to work around Josh Bell. Kind of smooth sailing the rest of the lineup. So I'm just going to rattle off a few names here and ask if you gravitate towards any of these guys. Herman Marquez, Luis Patino, and Josiah Gray. Those are three guys who I think are kind of risky plays, but all present some upside at single-digit ownership. Are those guys that you are on the same page with?
Yeah, I'm playing one lineup on the FanDuel slate today. I just didn't have much time to build lineups today, so I just threw one in that I built by hand, and Herman Marquez is my pitcher. I really like the spot for him. I wrote about him this afternoon. Just going up against that nothing Nationals lineup, I think is a really good opportunity for him to put up a really nice start for us here. And for some reason, I can't find them on my board to give you any of the numbers there because they're all the way at the top. So Marquez on the season, 24.2% strikeout rate, walks a few too many, 8.1%, but he pitches pretty clean, 3.55 xFIP, 12.5% swinging strike rate. I like the contact numbers as well, 4.8% barrel rate on the season, 36.7% hard hit, a 5.5 degree average launch angle with 88.4 miles an hour average exit velo. Not easy to hit a home run off of this guy. So I really like getting to Marquez. I think he's fairly priced. I won't say underpriced. He's fairly priced for his talent, and just nobody's going there in kind of a kick matchup that we've been attacking all along these last few weeks. So I don't really know why people kind of abandoned this play today. I expected him to be a lot more popular. I put him in that lineup once I saw the ownership projection.
Yeah, it's a good spot for him. Good pitcher. A lot of variance to him the second half of the year, but some of that can be attributed to, number one, brutal strength of schedule. You just consider the division he pitches in. He has to make starts against the Giants. He has to make starts against the Padres. He has to make starts against the Giants. He has to make half his starts at Coors Field. Now, there have been some spots where we all thought he was going to succeed against the Cubs, where he ended up falling on his face. But in general, it's been a good year for Herman Marquez. I believe in the talent, at least to the point I think he should be higher than 0.5% owned over on FanDuel. But let's dig into some of the value options now. On the cheap end of the pricing tier, who is the number one guy that you would be looking at to save money today?
I mean, we've got Eliza Hernandez is kind of obvious in that spot on the DK slate, but he's just going to be crushingly popular. 31% popularity, one of the most popular pitchers on that DK slate. It's got him way, way negative leveraged. I just think that's a really good spot going up against that Pirates lineup. So on talent, on matchup, I think he's interesting there at 6,800. But I think we just need to find a good pivot from that just because of how popular he's going to be. Adrian Hauser going up against that Cubs lineup. I don't love Adrian Hauser as a pitcher, but I think there's probably enough where he can get through that lineup a few times, rack up a couple strikeouts. We've talked about them a little bit recently, the Cubbies, and they've got maybe a few better bats than maybe we were giving them credit for, with some power in there. I think Ian Happ is a good player in general. Patrick Wisdom has hit a ton of home runs and has 295 ISO over 339 plate appearances, 26 home runs. That's bananas. Frank Schwindel has some power similarly, but the back end of the lineup and just, the hitters in general, it's not a great lineup. There's plenty of strikeouts here. So Hauser could put up a decent start at 7,100, and he's not drawing nearly as much popularity. He's around efficient ownership, I guess, but that would probably be my pivot from the much more popular Eliza Hernandez. I prefer the spot for Hernandez. And then you touched on, you asked me about Patino and Josiah Gray earlier, and we kind of flew through those guys when I pivoted to answer about the other guy. I like the spot for Patino. I think it's a good idea to use him to attack the Tigers lineup. Plenty of swing and miss against right-handed pitching again in that lineup. I'm not a Josiah Gray guy at this point. He is a guy who, when he's in a matchup, he creates a monster home run upside on the other side of the game for in my home run model here. 22.3 degree average launch angle, 12.4% barrel rate, 36.5% hard hit is very good, but he walks 10.8% of hitters. Just going to be too many guys on base, too much power potential or too much quality contact potential going the other way. So I don't really like the spot for Josiah Gray. I think I would be off of that one. Do you have any other pay down guys that I didn't touch on there? Because Casey Mize pops weirdly on my board, but I don't want to talk about him. He doesn't.
I'm kind of curious. I mean, I think Casey Mize sucks. So I'd be curious to see why, if there's a reason you think why he pops up on your board. Are you getting exposure to him because of that, or is it so you just look at the numbers and be like, oh, this guy sucks, I don't want to play him?
I deliberately took him out of my player pool so that I wouldn't get to him. This is one where I don't trust whatever's going on in my model here today for him. So I see no reason. 18.9% strikeout rate on the season going up against this deadly Rays lineup. I see no reason to play him. So that would be a no for me. Just looking at the rest of the list here, Taiwan Walker is at least interestingly priced at 7,800, 8,000. He's just very much a league average pitcher. He was buzzier earlier in the year when he was pitching better. But overall on the season, he's kind of fallen just down to league average, a little below average in some spots. But that Phillies lineup, not the most deadly in the world. We've talked about them being a little bit overrated a few times this season. I think he's capable of putting up like a mid-range start here. And with no ownership on him, I think that's at least okay. Maybe you consider him as an SP2 on DK. I think you could get that level of a start out of him. I don't love it. I don't expect him to rocket through the top of the board, but something in the middle would be unsurprising here.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the velocity numbers for Taiwan Walker really quick. I suspect he's pitching with an injury. His results are so terrible in the second half of the year. And he was hurt earlier in the year. And that's not something that's like any kind of conspiracy or something like that. He was most certainly hurt to the point where the Mets made it public that he was not allowed to swing the bat. They went from him batting right-handed to him batting left-handed and just standing there and taking pitches. And literally pitchers would just throw the ball right down the middle and he would stand there and stare at it. And all right, so Taiwan Walker, I have his baseball savant page up, but here is numbers post All-Star break. And I kind of like the Phillies as a stack today.
Okay.
So Taiwan Walker, after the All-Star break, he has where are these? Okay, here we go. So post All-Star break, a 7.11 FIP, a 5.29 xFIP. His strikeout rate in the first half of the year was 25%. His strikeout rate in the second half of the year is 19.3%. His walk rate in the first half of the year, 7.9%. Second half of the year, 19.2%. So now I'm going to look up the velocity numbers because if there's like a big dip in velocity here, there's something going on.
Sounds like what it would be, yeah.
So it's always hard to know for sure because we don't know all the information. But considering his drop off happened right around the time that's like, hey, you're batting left-handed now, and it's like, well, that's a little weird. And then there was also reports that he wasn't allowed to swing. So let me look up his velocity here.
0.57 home runs per 9 in the first half, 3.06 in the second half on FanGraphs splits board here. So yeah, it seems like a guy who just maybe throwing the ball a little bit too much over the plate and with not exactly the same stuff on it as earlier in the year.
Yeah,
so,
his velocity hasn't changed too much. Let's see. His spin rate has gone down a decent amount, and that's even from the post. Like his spin rate maintained after the crackdown on sticky substances for a little bit until about August. And then it dipped off pretty hard over the last 6 weeks or so. I'm just going to take a guess and say I don't think Taiwan Walker's healthy because these numbers are so poor for him. It's a different pitcher. He doesn't generate strikeouts anymore. He gives up a lot of hard contact. You know, we're still looking at a 50-inning sample size, so maybe it's just some wonky data, but I'm more inclined to stack against Taiwan Walker with the Phillies. Once again, I don't know exactly what's going on. I suspect an injury, though.
It makes a lot of sense going by those numbers. And you know, you just think about if the spin rate's reduced, it could be, he's hiding an elbow or wrist, something like that. Probably not a shoulder because it's more of a torque thing, putting the spin on the ball. But yeah, it certainly sounds viable that there's something going on there. So I agree with you. And look, it wasn't a spot I was in love with anyway. So I'm happy to take it down off the board and tell people not to go there now that we've got a really good tangible reason for it. So yeah, maybe we'll look at some Phillies bats on the other side. It would have been pretty much a both sides for me to take some shares of Phillies anyway. So are the Phillies a team that you're going to aggressively look to like push up your board because of that today?
They were earlier, but let me see where the ownership is now and give that a little refresh and see if that's changed. Because at least earlier in the day, we had them about appropriately owned, but I'm also just considerably lower on Taiwan Walker, certainly than Vegas, the betting lines right now. Like The books have this game as nearly a pick 'em, which is something I just didn't really agree with. But yeah, the Phillies are projected for 0.7% ownership today on DK. That is a number that I'm certainly interested in, given my stance on Taiwan Walker right now. Over on FanDuel, the Phillies are projected for 1% ownership. Yeah, this is a contrarian offense I like quite a bit.
Yeah, and look, there are definitely good individuals in this lineup. I actually wrote them up yesterday, I think it was. I have a real issue with Odubel Herrera leading off for this team, and they just run him out there again and again and again. He's under a 300 on base percentage as a leadoff man this season in several hundred plate appearances. Gene Segura hitting second. He should be their leadoff man. He's got a solid 358 on base percentage. He creates runs 15% better than average, but you can pretend he's the leadoff hitter. Start with him, go through Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Didi Gregorius. If you want to play some Freddie Galvis, he's in the lineup today as multi-position. He's super cheap on the FanDuel slate. Brad Miller having a great season, 333 plate appearances, 18 home runs at 229 ISO, creating runs 7% better than average. So yeah, there are bats in that lineup that I like to put together, and nobody's going to be on them, so it makes sense.
So anybody else in terms of pitching that we have not yet brought up, but think bears mentioning? One thing that's kind of funny about this slate, we've got 15 games, a lot of pitchers. I still think it's kind of a concentrated pitching slate. There aren't that many cheap guys to like. At the top end, Chris Sale really popular for a good reason. There's viable pivot options we've gone over, Walker Buehler in particular. In the mid-range, there's some contrarian guys to take stabs at, but nothing that I think is worth a crazy amount of exposure to. In general, I really want to be paying up at pitcher today. We mentioned Alicia Hernandez. He's fine as a value option, but he's going a little bit over-owned. Is there any other cheap option here that you think we're maybe overlooking?
Cheap option, maybe not. I'm not seeing anybody in that. Like we've talked about most of these guys that are super cheap. I don't believe in the Will Crow call. He's in like the middle of our probability board on the DraftKings slate. He's very, very cheap. I just don't think there's much there, even against the Marlins. I don't really believe in that one. So I don't know that I want to endorse that. Are you seeing Will Crow here any differently?
No, I think he's terrible. It's earlier in the day, I think we were able to look at Will Crow, Adam and I, and say like, all right, if he ends up being, 5% owned and Eliezer Hernandez is 30+% owned, maybe there was reason for pivot there, but just not for me. He's just not good enough. He's 27 years old. He's unrated prospect at 27. He's made limited starts at the major league level. And when we have seen him, he's been terrible. So we now have 25 big league starts for him. In those starts, he's a 6.42 ERA, a 6.4 FIP, doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts, walks a lot of guys, gives up a ton of hard contact. Obviously, the matchup on paper against the Marlins is fine, but I don't think there's enough upside here with Will Crow for me to want to get to him at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just not enough strikeouts, way too much hard hit, good contact. It's not a play for me. So that's one from around the middle of the board. It's not like, like I said, it's not like he's projected out toward the top, but I kind of believe in Luis Castillo, even against the Dodgers, who's projected below him. Ian Anderson against the Giants, who's projected below him on our board here. The one that comps interestingly for me is Josiah Gray, who, like I said, I was getting some pretty aggressive numbers on the opposing offense, so that'll be interesting from the middle. But I'm with you. I think it's a slate where we've got a fair amount of good expensive options up near the top of the board where I really want to live in a lot of those, get a lot of shares of Buehler. A guy that's priced up a little bit, surprisingly, I think, on the DK slate at 9,000 that we didn't touch on is Corey Kluber. Any interest in him for you going up against Cleveland here? Because he wasn't really on my radar really at all. Doesn't project, he projects all right for me. 7,700 on the FanDuel slate is at least a more reasonable price for him. I just think 9,000 is a lot to pay for him on DK.
Yeah, I'm concerned about length also. The innings for him since coming back, and the pitches have been there, but he's been so inefficient that it's really hard to trust him to work deep into games. So since coming off the injured list, he's made 3 starts. He has gone 4 innings, 3 2/3 innings, 4 innings. Could he maybe stretch out to get to 5, maybe 6 in ideal scenario? I guess. My actual interest in Corey Kluber is I have a bet on him for under 7.5 strikeouts. That was a number that FanDuel opened with today and was pretty off looking and has since been bet down to 6.5. But other than that, nothing that makes me want to get to him in DFS. I'm just concerned about the length.
Yeah, that would be the concern for me as well. And I mean, I tell you what, he's had a few nice outings overall, 26.1% strikeout rate, but he still is walking 10.9% of hitters for the season, 4.30 xFIP, a 1.31 whip. There's just a lot of guys on base. When you do that in Yankee Stadium against a team with a decent amount of power, like the Guardians on the other side, It's easy to get into trouble here. So yeah, I don't see the Corey Kluber at that 9,000 price. Maybe a couple shares at 7,700 on FanDuel, 3% ownership. Maybe I can get behind that a little bit more. I just don't like the price on DK.
Yeah, I totally agree. If he was cheaper, maybe I could reason. And then over on FanDuel, the issue really becomes, well, is he going to get the quality start bonus? Most likely not, given the kind of length we've gotten out of him. Is he going to get the win bonus? It's even in question if he's going to be able to make it through 5 innings. The last time Corey Kluber went 5 innings was, oh geez, we have to go back and look at the time he's on the injured list. Like, yeah, I mean, it's back in the middle of May that the last time Corey Kluber's pitched 5 full innings. So is it possible? Yes, but I don't think it's the most likely outcome that we're going to be getting 6 innings there out of Kluber. So yeah, pitchers, I think that really.
It actually was his no-hitter.
Oh,
I said that joke. I said that jokingly. It was a no-hitter. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder too, like how many pitchers have we seen throw a no-hitter like that and then suffer some kind of injury or it kind of derails their season? I know that John Means is a guy that you personally don't really believe in a ton in terms of his overall talent. You thought the beginning of the year from was a little bit of a mirage, but with that in mind, he pitched well at the beginning of the year. He throws that no-hitter where he throws a career high in pitches. He sucked ever since then. He got hurt like 2 starts later. His velocity was down the start after. So it's definitely some of those starts where you see players go out and throw 15, 20 pitches more than they usually do. It's cool at the time to get the no-hitter, but then you do have to worry about some of the ramifications long-term. And one of those things we saw, Corbin Burns was going for a no-hitter last week, potentially to really give him a grip on the Cy Young Award. And the Brewers ultimately took him out of the game in the 8th inning. You're like, dude, you've already thrown 112 pitches. Are we really going to, risk our World Series potential just to get you this no-hitter? So, I think that no-hitter really derailed Kluber's season.
Yeah, and it's like the same concept as guys in the home run derby just screwing up their swing from playing in that. Guys throw too many pitches and they get a little bit wonky in their recovery time, and it just tracks them throughout the season and they don't recover. So yeah, I'm with you on that. That makes a lot of sense. And I totally endorse that Brewers move. I mean, it's a team sport. It's about winning. It's not about the individual accomplishments. Yes, it's great to get a no-hitter, but when managers leave guys in chasing a no-hitter into a situation where they could potentially lose the game in a tough spot, like, it just makes no sense to me. So yeah, screw the record books. Go for the wins.
Yeah, I have Corbin Burns futures bets, and I would have liked the narrative of that. But that aside, I also have Brewers World Series tickets, and that's also something where that bet definitely I think benefits from them taking out sooner. So we're going to head over to the hitters, talking about some stacks here. But first, today's show is sponsored by Jock Market. If you guys are not familiar with Jock Market, this is a totally different way to play daily fantasy sports. Head on over to your app store, download the Jock Market app. Make your first deposit. Use the promo code Awesemo to get a $50 bonus on your first deposit. And as just a kind of general overview on what Jock Market is, you don't have to worry about salary caps. You don't have to worry about correlation, stacks, or anything like that. It's just a stock market, but for athletes. So there's an IPO period. You bid on players. You try to get shares of them. Then after the slate starts, you can buy and sell players as the slate goes on. It's a fun, different way to play daily fantasy sports. Download the app. Use the promo code Awesemo. Get a $50 bonus on that first deposit. All right, let's head on over to the stacks, Terry, and let's get a little refresh on the ownership here and see where we're at. But I'm going to ask you right off the bat, if you could only stack one team today, who would you be going towards? Ownership considered as well.
Just reloading that page there. So I really like the spot, and I wrote about them as my featured stack. I like the spot for the Chicago White Sox, pulling a little bit of positive leverage. I like that lineup from top to bottom, basically, on most slates. They're one of the more popular teams that I've written about through the season. But showing up against Taylor Hearn, I don't think there's much to worry about with him. 22% strikeout rate is okay, but there's nothing fearsome there. 4.61 xFIP, walks too many at 9%, 8.2% barrel rate, 37.7% hard hit is decent at limiting hard hit, but I just think he's a targetable enough pitcher, and these are very, very talented hitters, and they're all going under 10% ownership, except for Luis Robert on the DK slate at 11%. So I want to get to this White Sox lineup pretty aggressively. Well, if I can only have one, I can only do it once, but that's my choice.
I agree with you. And here's something that's really changed from earlier in the day until now. Earlier in the day, I think we had the White Sox projected as the second most popular offense on the slate, and they're just not anymore. We have them with 3.4% projected ownership over on FanDuel. DK projected for 5.7% ownership. I certainly think the FanDuel ownership to me is egregious. They should be way higher than that. So I have no issues with that call whatsoever. Also something to talk when we look at some of the pricing for this team over on DK. There's a lot of guys who are just kind of underpriced. Yohan Moncada, only 4K. And Cesar Hernandez, 3,400 at the bottom of the order. Even guys like, Eloy Jimenez is 4,100. I thought Jimenez was just going to end up being, what that?
Sorry. Yeah. I was agreeing with you. That makes no sense, that price.
Some of the prices are just wrong. And early in the day, these guys were picking up, 16, 17% ownership. But now that's just not the case at this point in the day. They make for a very appealing stack, with the price points being what they are against Taylor Hearn, who I don't really think is a good starting pitcher whatsoever. This has gone a team that was from being a little bit over-owned early in the day to a very high priority for me now.
Yeah, definitely. And look, you mentioned a couple of the really good hitters in there. Timmy Anderson is in the lineup tonight. He's been struggling with his legs, and they're kind of trying to give him a couple days off here and there, but he's a great player. 14 home runs, 17 stolen bases on the year. When he's healthy, legit like 25 kind of a profile. He's still slashing 300, 328, 452, creating runs 13% better than average. You get Luis Robert in there, who's only 239 plate appearances this year with his injury. You get Eloy in there with only 172 plate appearances. They both still hit 8 home runs each. Both have a 201 ISO so far. So there's plenty of power still there between those two guys. I've talked about Yasmani Grandal on this show a bunch of times, one of my favorite hitters in the league. I just am entertained by his 22.8% walk rate over 311 plate appearances, 20 home runs, a massive 284 ISO from him. Just a fascinating hitter to watch. So I really like getting to this team. Bottom end of the lineup, maybe a little weaker than normal with Romy Gonzalez and Billy Hamilton in there today, but you can use those guys there. Billy Hamilton's got his speed. He's got major on base issues, but if he does get on base, he can steal you a bag. He can score some runs wrapping back around to the top of the lineup. So I think they're playable at least 1 through 6 aggressively, and then use those bottom 3 hitters as you need to.
Let's Sean V, who's kind of He's like a third seat on the show sometimes because he's always in chat. He's always throwing in comments. He is vehemently opposed to stacking against Taylor Hearn. All right, Taylor Hearn's given up multiple home runs in 3 of his last 4 starts. His overall numbers for the year are not particularly good. And keep in mind also, a lot of those numbers are out of the bullpen, where it should be easier to accumulate good stats. But he's a 4.53 expected ERA for the year, a 5.01 FIP. His ERA is lower at 3.99, but it's not like that's spectacular. He has a 254 BABIP, a 77.9% left on base rate. Zips projects him for a 5.6 ERA the rest of the year. Steamer projects him for a 4.88 ERA. I don't see it. I don't think he's good. And like I said, he's given up multiple home runs in 3 of his last 4 starts. It's a guy who gives up a whole lot of hard contact. And his numbers as a starter, by the way, are significantly worse than his numbers as a reliever. If you just go to FanGraphs and you look at his splits, as a starter, his strikeout rate is considerably lower. It goes from 23.9% as a reliever, 19% as a starter. His FIP as a starter, 5.47. His ERA as a starter is also elevated. I don't agree that he's better as a starter than he was as a reliever.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any of that or any real reason to worry about this guy at all. I'm not sure what our pal Sean V might be basing that one on. Sometimes he comes out of left field with some of his takes. He's gotten me a couple times where I said, no, that's silly, and he turned out to be right. I'm not seeing this one though, buddy. That's an interesting one. Also, just, you can kind of go shorthand on it a little bit. Ranked as the 33rd prospect in the Rangers organization. That does not make you a good baseball player at age 27. So yeah, I don't see this guy putting up much resistance for the White Sox here. Willing to be wrong about it, but I don't see it.
Here we've got a very important super chat here from Bat Jones 22. How helpful are low-key stats like KEV, STA, IN, DLER? Listen, Kev Standler, there's nothing more important than him on the YouTube channel. I'd say you don't weigh anything other than that, except for maybe Sean B's opinions. Those 2 things, and that's all you really need to build some lineups on this particular YouTube channel. But let's talk some other stacks because we spent a whole lot of time talking about them. But Boston Red Sox, on paper, fantastic spot, but they have become massively popular. We've got Boston projected for a 14% ownership share as a team over on DK, over on FanDuel projected for 11%. The real 2 chalk teams on the slate we have is the Boston Red Sox and the Milwaukee Brewers over on DK. On FanDuel, there's a couple other of popular teams also in the mix, but how are you handling a really chalky Boston team that's in a great spot against the Orioles?
Yeah, it's a spot I really want to get to going up against Keegan Aiken, who another guy, just unless Sean V tells us otherwise, I think is incredibly targetable here. 19.7% strikeout rate, a 9.3% walk rate, going to be putting plenty of guys on base. 10.3% barrel rate, 41.5% hard hit. You cannot bring those numbers against this Red Sox team. The issue on the ownership is a big concentration on Hunter Renfroe, Xander Bogaerts up at the top. It levels out pretty quickly. You can get Rafael Devers at 12%, JD at 12%, Bobby Dahlbeck and all his power under 10%. So there's ways to get to them that aren't incredibly overowned. Maybe it's a 3-man stack. Maybe you grab 2 of them in a one-off with another big 5-man that's a little bit one of the positively leveraged teams and do it that way. Similar story on the FanDuel slate. A lot of the ownership concentrated toward the top 3 hitters, and then it really levels off and gets under 10% at Rafael Devers. So you can get Devers, JD Martinez, Bobby Dahlbeck all in the 9.95 range, and then put them together with any of those top hitters and build your 4-man. I'm fine with that. So I don't know that they're. I mean, in the overall, in the aggregate, they're crazy overowned. But once we start talking about the individuals, I think we can offset some of that ownership pretty quickly here. And then you can throw in like a Christian Vasquez down the bottom, Alex Verdugo down the bottom. Certainly a very good hitter, not pulling very much ownership at all. So I like putting them together where you can. Just focus on being unique with it. But I think it makes sense to still include them in the portfolio.
Yeah, I just want to be underweight to it. It's so much ownership going to them, and it's a little different DK versus FanDuel. And by the way, Top Stacks Tool, I think I forgot to mention this, but Top Stacks Tool is free to use over on Awesemo.com, so you can see some of these numbers we're looking at. But it is a different situation with Boston on DK versus FanDuel. We're 11% ownership on FanDuel, 14% on DK. Negatively leveraged on both. At the very least, I think you want to be underweight to the field on them. I have about half the amount of exposure the field has. I think that is a good way to go. But let's get into some of the more contrarian offenses, Terry. We talked about the White Sox, maybe not massively contrarian, but probably a little bit underowned. Is there any team you're looking at as, I would say, like sub 5% as a priority stack for you?
Let's see what we got here. Just looking down the board, it looks like the Oakland A's are going really low owned on this one. And that's just a team that I've gotten to a fair amount of the time throughout the season. I think it's a decent spot. I know we don't love the idea of attacking bullpen games, but I don't really have that big a problem with going after this Angels bullpen and, you know, whatever comes out of it. It's not like they're incredible or anything. So taking some shots with Josh Harrison, Starling Marte, Matt Olson, Matt Chapman, Jed Lowry up the top of the lineup there. I can take those guys when they're all trending for under 1% ownership or around 2% ownership on the other site. So I like that A spot. I think they're at least interesting to me. They weren't like rocketing up to the top of my board, but they're definitely interesting with those ownership numbers.
I don't know if this counts as a good omen, but as soon as you brought up the A's, literally at the exact same time, I saw the A's lineup come across. Harrison, Marte, Olson, Kana, Pinder, Chapman, Gomes, Davis, Kemp. So we do have that lineup in now. And yeah, I think the A's, it's a team that we brought up earlier in the day when I was doing the strategy show with Adam. I generally do not like to roster bullpen games. I try to stay away from them. The reason being is that the bullpen, even if a team generally has a bad bullpen, it's typically better than just back end starters because it's really easy for guys to have success in 1 to 2 innings. It's hard to maintain that success when you're facing guys multiple times through the order. But a couple of things. Number one, the Angels bullpen is an outlier in terms of how bad they are. This is a very, very bad bullpen. And then also the A's have a really good offense. It's going totally overlooked by the field. There's nobody here picking up ownership, nobody that's really popular. So just looking at some of the individual players that we have in Oakland, the most popular player in the entire lineup is Matt Olson at 1.4% projected ownership. There's not a single other player projected for more than 0.6%, and that's Starling Marte at 0.6. So it's not hard to get overweights to the field on them. They're certainly warranted based on our projections in terms of them being a top stack. So I'm with you. I like that call.
Yeah. I think that just everything that you said there, and I like the A's too, because you get a bunch of guys who have reasonable hit tools, ability to get on base, and can score you points in a lot of different ways. The top 4 hitters in the lineup here, average on base percentage is .372. That's pretty fantastic. And one of those 4 guys is Starling Marte, who leads the league in stolen bases. That's pretty damn good for run creation, sequential hitting, all those different things. So it's a really good offense that I like to target. So it's definitely one that's going to push up the board a little bit here for me. You get Chris Davis down the bottom of the lineup again, 2,200 on FanDuel, 2 home runs on the season, a 160 ISO, hitting 187, 259 on base percentage. You like the shot for Chris Davis to hit one out of the park here against the bullpen?
In general, not really, but I'm fine. I'm fine with playing him for his price, his power upside, and his low ownership. He's also somebody who you don't really need to include in a stack because he's so home run or bust that he's fine as a one-off as well. But he's of an Oakland team that I think is going under-owned and is also underpriced some of the middle of the order bats. I actually don't really think you need to get to Chris Davis just because it's already so contrarian. You could just play the 5 best hitters in the lineup in the top 5. And it's not like other spots where it's like, oh, we're concerned about any kind of ownership or anything like that. All of them are 1% lower. So I'm more inclined to just take the 5 best bats from Oakland and you're already contrarian enough.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not even a price conversation because you've got Chad Pinder hitting 5th in the middle of that lineup at the exact same 2,200 price on the FanDuel slate, and somehow he costs $3,000 on DK where Chris Davis costs $3,800. That doesn't make any damn sense. So if you're looking for a cheap outfielder, go to the guy hitting higher up who's a better hitter. Just makes sense.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at with some of these contrarian offenses. When I'm digging down the lineup, it's like, all right, here's a super popular offense. I'm trying to differentiate a little bit. Let's pull out, Lourdes Gurriel from Toronto, who's always cheaper and lower owned than everybody else, but not this particular spot. But I want to get your thoughts on one team here, the Minnesota Twins as a stack. The reason being, Hyun-Jin Ryu is not a bad pitcher, but he is so ridiculously inconsistent this year. This is the opposite of what I thought about this pitcher in the past. Ryu's always been a guy who's a pretty high floor guy, the ceiling moderately but not super high, but you're never really getting bad starts out of him in the past. This year, the guy is all over the place. Here are just his box scores for fantasy purposes. And this is using DraftKings scoring. 27, -10, 9, 26, -3, 15, 28, -6. That's a lot of variance for a starting pitcher going up against a Minnesota Twins offense that's number 1, reasonably priced. Number 2, has some power upside. They're also playing in a favorable hitter's park in Toronto. This is a contrarian stack I like today, mostly because Hyun-Jin Ryu is all over the board. He's somebody, and also talking about difficulty of matchup, his last time I was against Baltimore, he scores -6 fantasy points. The time before that, he scores 27.7 in New York against the Yankees. There's no rhyme or reason to when he pitches well or when he pitches poorly. So we're getting an offense with some power against an erratic pitcher and once again, less than 1% aggregate ownership on the Twins. So that's another contrarian stack that I put in the same bucket as Oakland that I like getting to.
Yeah, I like that call. A lot of right-handed hitters up toward the top of the lineup, switch hitter and Jorge Polanco, but you get all the power with Miguel Sano from the right side of the plate, Josh Donaldson obviously on the right side of the plate, Byron Buxton up there. Nobody going to these guys at all. They're relatively affordable for their talent. It trails off toward the back end because you get Max Kepler from the left side. You get Luis Arias, who's just a hit tool specialist, put the ball in play kind of a guy, but not really a ton of power upside from him hitting from the left side of the plate in the 6th spot. Brent Rooker, I think, could be somewhat interesting from in the 7 hole, and Ryan Jeffers is a catcher if you need him on the back end. Decent contact profile for Jeffers, 13% barrel rate, 43.2% hard hit on the season, 13 home runs and a 203 ISO, slashing 199, 272, 402, and creating runs 18% worse than average along the way. But there's definitely a power stick down at the bottom of the lineup there. So yeah, you can definitely roster these guys. And with the idea that nobody's getting to them and that they're pretty cheap when you go through the overall of the lineup, particularly on the FanDuel slate, I think they become more interesting in a game where I do still have lingering respect for Hyun-Jin Ryu. I think it's whatever he's struggling with. I think we'll see him get over it someday, but it's probably not going to be today. 41.7% hard hit on the season, 7.9% barrel rate, only striking out 20.3% of hitters. I think he's targetable with these bats here, and they are creating a nice little bubble in my home run model as well.
Yeah, and the other thing about Hyun-Jin, I'm not even saying that he's bad. I'm just saying that he's ridiculously inconsistent. His numbers for the year, they're middle of the road. Also consider some of the rough pitching environments he had to go in with, Toronto playing in that minor league ballpark in Dunedin, and then also Toronto being favorable park, that, and also he has to face the Yankees, he has to face the Red Sox, he has to face the Rays. So all things considered is 4.11 ERA, 4.32 expected ERA, 3.82 FIP. Those are not awful results considering the circumstances. It's just that the range of outcomes on him is so crazy wild that it kind of leads me to think this Minnesota Twins team has a little bit of upside there. Any other offenses here that are pretty important to you? If not, then we could jump over and do some prop plays.
I think Seattle is somewhat interesting given the pretty high positive leverage mark that they've got on the DK slate. I wrote about them a little bit. It's a team that I have gone to a few times through the season. They don't really land on the top of the top stacks board all that often, but they're coming up in a matchup against what is now John Heasley. Earlier in the day, it was Brady Singer. Heasley making his major league debut, I believe, and was only up to Double-A, if I remember correctly what I saw. Let me just pull him back up here. So I think it's just a targetable spot, given that you're talking about a kid making his major league debut. Yeah, Heasley he's 24. He is a 29th ranked prospect in the Royals organization, kind of similar to who we're talking about from Texas. Does not make you a good baseball player. 40 grade command profile, 35-40. It's not a very high end pitcher. He was striking out 27.7% of hitters at Double-A. That's a reasonably good strikeout rate, but he was pitching as a 24-year-old in Double-A, has not even pitched in Triple-A. I'd be concerned if I was a Royals fan that he's going to get lit up here. And for DFS purposes, with no one on them, you can absolutely go to J.P. Crawford, Mitch Haniger, Kyle Seager, Ty France, Abraham Toro. Even Kelnick, I'll take out some shares of just based on general talent and the fact that he's 3,500, 2,600 across the industry. Up to 10 home runs on the season, only a 138 ISO, still creating runs 46% worse than average. It's not a good debut season for Jared Kelnick, but he is a very high-end kid in terms of his prospect profile coming up all the way. I think Luis Torrens has a very interesting bat for a catcher play for 4,100, 2,300 across the two sites. A lot of power from him, 14 home runs on the season, a 194 ISO, 43.2% hard hit and 11.7% barrel rate. And then, just like I said, I flew through the guys at the top of the order. Those are the priorities 1 through 5. That's an easy stack to put together. They're not that expensive. They play positions that flow well into other stacks where we want to get to some premium bats. So I really like that 1 through 5 stack on the Mariners.
Yeah, I dig it. And another thing also is another one earlier in the day, actually, Brady Singer was supposed to start, and that was somebody that Adam and I were kind of drawing some interest in as a potential value play on ZK, because at the time he was, well, I guess still is, except he's just not an option because he's not pitching, but his salary is at 52 or 5,300. So I was like, hey, that's kind of an appealing low price pitching option that Adam had pointed me to with no ownership at the time, but now no longer starting. And John Heasley, at least the data we have on him, the ERA looks good enough in Double-A, but to your point, he's old pitching in Double-A. He's never pitched in Triple-A, and the underlying numbers don't match up with the ERA. He had a 4.58 FIP in Double-A. He was really benefiting from an 84.8% strand rate. That was really what was holding that ERA down. So I don't really see any reason to think he's going to be a great pitcher at the major league level right now. Steamer has him projected for a 5.12 ERA the rest of the year. So that's a good shout out. I like Seattle as a contrarian team as well. Anything else that kind of catches your eye here? If not, we could do some home run picks and wish people good luck.
Yeah, let's jump over to the picks, the props, wherever you want to go. I think we've covered at least the interesting, positively leveraged teams, and the Top Stacks tool is free today. So just jump over there, guys. You can look at the stuff we're looking at here.
Yeah, and also don't go anywhere after the show's over, guys. We've got the college football live before lock after this. Also, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've had so much daily fantasy content lately. We had today, there was MMA. Tomorrow there's going to be MMA, and today there was college football, NFL on a number of different sites we covered. Obviously, baseball as well. So really kicking into gear right now, and basketball season starting up pretty close. We're only about a month away from basketball, which is going to be another thing on our plates. So make sure you're subscribed to that notification bell so you know when the shows are starting. But home run picks. So Terry, who is the top home run? Who is the top home run rating at the top of your board?
So let me make sure he's in the lineup. Yep, the top of my board. I mentioned the home run profile that Josiah Gray has been creating in my model. So the top of the board is populated by Rockies today, and Mr. CJ Cron was my home run pick. He is the very top of my home run board here. Monster power hitter, doesn't do a whole hell of a lot else, but I like him for home runs. 27 on the season, a 257 ISO and 482 plate appearances, 11.6% barrel rate. I like CJ Cron for a homer here.
All right, and here is the number one homer. This is whenever it's not Jared Walsh, I get excited. Jared Walsh ends up being like the number one guy in our home run model almost every single day, and then people get upset about it online because I bring up Jared Walsh again. But we got somebody different today, and it is Bobby Dahlback, and that spot for the Boston Red Sox. Also, let me check to make sure that he ended up being in the lineup, which he is. Bobby Dahlback hitting sixth, also reasonably priced today, going to be somewhat popular. So here's the real appeal to Bobby Dahlback, other than it being a really good spot. You get Keegan Aiken for the Orioles, you get that crappy Orioles bullpen. Bobby Dahlback plus 530 to homer today. Those are pretty long odds considering the spot that Boston's in. Dahlback has shown some power upside this year. That is a spot that I think the odds are pretty far off considering some of the power upside in the matchup for Dahlback. So probably somebody who, based on our projection, should be closer to a plus 400. So those odds, I think it looks favorable. What do you think of Dahlback?
Yeah, I love that call. That's a monster spot. He's right around my you've got a good shot number, that magic number of 10 that I talk about. 22 home runs on the season, a 248 ISO, 47.5% hard hit rate, 19.6% barrel rate, leads the Red Sox by a pretty significant margin, and that is a team that barrels the ball frequently. Love Dahlback, love the call. Traded him to EMAC in the Dynasty League. had to get Chris Bryant and Tyler Mahle on my team for the stretch run, but that one hurt. I like Bobby Dahlbeck quite a bit. He's going to be a lot better too. He's going to be a 10% walk rate guy in a couple of years. He's going to be a significant power hitter in the league.
EMAC 2024. I assume he went to sleep. It seems pretty far past his bedtime this time. But EMAC was pretty active in the YouTube chat not too long ago, and then I guess he nodded off and fell asleep. But that is going to do it for us today, guys. Good luck tonight, but also stick around. College football live before lock is coming up next.